This hearing of the Select Committee on the Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. These are public proceedings being audio streamed live via the Parliament's website, and a Hansard transcript is being made. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. Witnesses before parliamentary committees cannot be sued or prosecuted for giving evidence or for the content of the evidence they give. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a Senate committee. The Senate has resolved that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth or of a state should not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. If a witness objects to answering a question, they should state the ground on which the objection is made, and the committee will determine whether it will insist on an answer, having regard to the ground which is claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request that the answer be given in camera. Commonwealth officers appearing today are also reminded of the Senate order specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. A copy of the order is available from the Secretariat. So I now welcome Mr Marcus Blackie, Mayor of King Island, and representatives of the King Island Council. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today, as well as yourself, Dr Catherine Dale.
Councillor Marcus Blackie, I'm the Mayor of King Island, Tasmania.
And Dr Catherine Dale, I'm the Interim General Manager at King Island.
Thank you. I now invite you to make a short opening statement, taking into consideration that you have also already given us a precursor, and at the conclusion of any remarks, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions.
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell, and as Mayor of King Island, on behalf of all King Islanders, I want to firstly say thank you to you and the other senators for bringing the committee here to King Island, Tasmania. It's a great compliment to us, A, that you're here and can walk the ground here and what is country heaven, but it's fantastic also that we're the first stop on your review of the Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme, and that's critically important to us. King Island, we are totally and utterly reliant upon aviation and freight for our very way of life, economics, everything here on King Island. At the moment, King Island suffers from higher cost of living than the rest of Australia, disproportionately so, and we are also enduring very high airfares, which are stifling movement to and from King Island and no doubt stifling tourism, general movement, etc. and everything else. The Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme, we understand wholeheartedly, is paid for by the federal government and the Australian taxpayer. We are therefore very grateful to the federal government and to the Australian taxpayer for the investment that is required to provide equity for places like King Island and Tasmania as a whole. Currently the Freight Equalisation Scheme is obsolete and out of date. It hasn't kept pace with changes to shipping, particularly where King Island and Flinders Island are exposed more so than mainland Tasmania, and it hasn't kept pace with the current suboptimal shipping arrangements we have flying King Island, and to a lesser extent Flinders Island as well. And at the moment we are disproportionately enduring a disproportionately high shipping freight costs, which are stifling our economy and also creating cost of living here on King Island, which if something isn't done soon, we are concerned might ultimately become unsustainable. Aviation is our Highway 1 here on King Island. Aviation is the only way that passengers can come and go from King Island, hence the criticality of that. But furthermore, aviation is also used critically for air freight for King Island. We have newspapers, mail, courier items, spare parts, perishable foods coming every day via aircraft. That currently is not the beneficiary of any equalisation at all, and we pay very high prices for that air freight to come in. that is basically the basic supply lines to King Island and nothing extravagant. So I'll highlight that first and foremost. As a council, we have to own and operate our own airport here on King Island because of the critical importance of aviation for us and as a facility, which we do. Shipping is our highway too. Our commercial port is in Grassy on the eastern side of King Island. All of our shipped goods and cargo and the movement, including the movement of livestock, fuel and other things, all comes and goes through our Grassy port. Our Grassy port is quite small. It doesn't have a very large aperture, so only small ships can currently enter and depart from Grassy Harbour, which means that at the moment we are enduring, as I just mentioned before, a suboptimal shipping solution whereby we essentially have open barges resupplying King Island and having to endure the volatile seas of Bass Strait, which can be very precarious, particularly in winter. In winter, shipping coming and going from King Island is often a 50-50 proposition. If the weather is bad, the ships won't even depart from Devonport or Stanley to come to King Island, and there are times where the ships may speculatively depart, but they're not able to get into King Island because of bad weather, especially in winter. Again, this means that ultimately, time being money or other considerations, that also drives up freight costs to and from King Island. King Island we are blessed in many, many ways. Although we endure high costs of living at the moment, and it causes us considerable consternation and frustration, we know that we are blessed to live in country heaven, and we know the quality of life here makes up for it. However, we have to do what we can to try and improve economies of scale and equities, and we, as an economy, King Island, we disproportionately punch above our weight. Our biggest export earner is grass-fed beef, which is in very, very high demand. We typically export from King Island 40,000 beasts a year off to Tasmania for processing. That's about 25% of Tasmania's total beef herd in a given year. We also have a large seafood industry here. We have a large kelp industry also. We have a tungsten mine that has recently reopened on King Island, digging out very, very high quality tungsten that is in demand throughout the world. And we also have a growing tourism industry, in particular driven by the popularity of our new golf courses here on King Island. We have two in particular spectacular links golf courses here on King Island that pioneers and visionaries had the wherewithal to design and build some 15 years ago. One of them is now Australia's #1 golf course, Cape Wickham Links, and brings golf tourists and others to King Island in their droves. That's fantastic for King Island, a fantastic success, but in many respects we're victims of our own success because of that. We've hit capacity in many areas, including aviation or airline movement to and from King Island. We often have a shortage of seats and capacity, as well as very high airfares. We have a shortage of tourist accommodation currently. We have a shortage of residential housing, etc. So we are victims of our success. As a mayor, they're good problems to have, but they're problems we've got to solve nonetheless. We have aspirations to grow King Island from its current population of about 2,000 up to 3,500. During the 1970s, which was considered the halcyon days for King Island, the population was about 3,500, and it seemed to be the perfect fit for the island as far as filling up all the jobs, filling up all the clubs, being great for small business and giving the island a real buzz, but of course not ruining any of the natural wonders that we're blessed with here. So our aspirations currently on King Island are to continue to grow King Island up to and back to the 3,500 population it was during the 1970s, and at the same time develop and grow all industries here on King Island. Some industries are unfortunately currently in decline, like our famous cheese making. We are hopeful that King Island Dairy will pull through and be sold as a going concern to a new buyer, and the company will be revitalised, and we will continue to make our legendary cheese here on King Island. But at the moment, that outcome is uncertain and unclear. It's something we are currently dealing with as a constituency. The biggest issues for us as far as the freight equalisation scheme is concerned is that aside from a few exported items, it really provides King Island no real equity at all on a day-to-day basis to meet costs of living, to meet our unique logistical challenges here, as I said before, disproportionately reliant upon aviation and shipping, we are totally exposed, more than mainland Tasmania, more than anywhere else in Australia, to freight, to the inequities of freight, especially when we have a suboptimal shipping solution. We punch above our weight economically. We are confident that with an improved Tasmanian freight equalisation scheme that provides more equity to King Island, aside from being grateful for that investment and that improvement, we are confident we will return that investment to the Australian taxpayer in the fullness of time. What we are requesting for King Island as far as an ideal future improved Tasmanian freight equalisation scheme for King Island is universal application for all shipped goods to and from King Island. We are asking for updated and recalculated Tasmanian freight equalisation scheme costing formulas specifically for King Island and the Bass Strait Islands, if we include Flinders Island as well. We would like to include bulk fuel shipments in freight equity to King Island. Currently, fuel on King Island is $2.61, amongst the highest in Australia. In addition to those improvements for freight, we would like to see the inclusion of aviation, passenger and freight movement under an improved Tasmanian freight equalisation scheme for King Island, where more equity is provided to King Island to assist us not only with the high cost of airfares and the critical reliance upon aviation passenger movement, but also our critical reliance upon aviation freight, which currently receives no equity whatsoever, and we are forced to endure extremely high air freight costs to bring it across for daily requirements. We would like to see improved Tasmanian freight equalisation scheme administration. In particular, we would like to see automatic application or automatic refund or automatic rebate as part of a freight bill or an air ticket, rather than a retrospective application by individuals or businesses, which have been described to me often as like filling in a tax return to get $40 freight equalisation back. So ideally we want improved and streamlined administration of a future scheme, and it would be ideal if it can be rolled immediately into the quoting and ticketing of sea freight and or air freight or aviation movement. We'd like to see an improved future Tasmanian freight equalisation scheme indexed annually, whether that's CPI, whether that's another index, whatever is deemed appropriate. Because as far as the items at the moment that we are the beneficiary of the current or extant freight equalisation scheme for King Island, basically the refunds we're receiving are stuck back in the 1990s. They haven't kept pace, and really they're not making a significant difference to us at the moment. They're not helping us, and equity for King Islanders has departed long ago as far as the current freight equalisation scheme is concerned. We would like to see the restoration of the national highway to the Bass Strait Islands and us achieve equity with the rest of Australia, as we've long been promised but hasn't been achieved. You saw the photo before, the graphic of Australia's great national highway system. King Island is on that map and Flinders Island is on that map, but we're not currently part of the national highway system. That needs to change. And given King Island's amazing history, given how much we disproportionately punch above our weight, given our economic power and our future aspirations for ourselves, we deserve to be a part of the national highway system. We are obviously requesting that today, and we very, very greatly appreciate your consideration on that front. Catherine, would you like to add? Continue for me?
Just happy to answer any questions. Just our submission to the inquiry, I think, has outlined those 7 key areas pretty succinctly, but we're very happy to answer any questions that you might have on any of those 7 key factors.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. So we're going to rotate around with questions. I'll start briefly, if that's okay. So what difference would index payments make to businesses applying for freight reimbursement on King Island?
Sorry, Senator, you said answer that question again. I didn't...
If payments for freight equalisation were indexed, how would that improve the systems here for you for equity?
At the moment, the vast majority of goods that come and go from King Island by shipping are not covered by the current Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme. There's only a handful of things that they can actually apply for the scheme for, and when they do that, they have to do that retrospectively after the movement has been successfully completed, and they have to fill out a fair bit of paperwork to receive a disproportionately small refund under the current scheme.
So what's currently covered?
Which is not covered.
What is currently covered? Or would it be easier to say what is not?
Yeah, it would be easy to say what's not covered.
Sorry, Senator. Can I just go back in terms of your question about indexation? And there's an example that we provide in our written submission, and it gives an example from March 2012, which at that point in time was 28% of the total freight cost, and in 2024 it's now 15%. So indexation, or some sort of, as the Mayor said, some sort of analysis about what would be an appropriate indexation or cost increase would go a long way towards even just restoring what was back in 2012, if that makes sense.
So it's not equalising.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's primarily designed, as it currently stands, for certain categories of completed or value-added goods designed to be exported primarily or sold in mainland Australia. So that excludes probably the vast majority of freight coming and going from King Island. Doesn't receive any sort of equity. It's a limited categorisation, limited categories, and it has to be applied for retrospectively at the moment.
So how have businesses survived to date then?
Basically by guile, hard work, and all the kind of ingenuity and cunning that small businesses these days have to muster. It's been difficult. It's been a difficult time for the island. 2024 in particular has been a year of challenges. Obviously, we've got the uncertainty with the King Island Dairy factory at the moment. We had an unexpected drought to commence 2024 here on King Island, our worst drought since 1903, and it really had a big impact on our economy because the whole island had to destock cattle early, and many farmers had to cut their losses and had to export off. Obviously, how we had to destock the island. Thankfully, in recent months, we've had a fair bit of rain. Our dams are filled up. There's been good runoff, and you can see now.
I've seen people bailing yesterday too. Which is
Yes, and obviously with the onset of spring, the pasture is starting to get going again, and so we're confident we'll be within a space of 12 months or so, or maybe perhaps 18 months, our herds might be restored to their previous size. But that hit King Island hard economically. And by and large, the freight costs for getting beef off King Island is extremely high. They have to go off on those trailers, as I showed you before, those double-deck trailers on an open ship. And by and large, there's not enough equity received for that. But King Islanders have endured. We've done our best. Thankfully, prices have been high, and again, the produce that comes from King Island is extremely high quality by Australian standards and by world standards, so we can charge a premium price, and we have to, because otherwise most businesses wouldn't be viable. This is where we really need improvements in the freight equalisation scheme to help us not only through a difficult period, but really to allow King Island's economy to get firing on all cylinders heading into the future. If we do that, and if we had better freight arrangements and better circumstances, there's no reason why King Island couldn't export 80,000 beef cattle per year. And do a whole lot of things. There's no reason why we couldn't then increase our population to 3,500 and really get going.
Just to expand on that, so again, our submission makes a point of two particular areas where we would like freight equalisation to apply to, and one is fuel, which the Mayor has covered. Yeah. The other one is construction and building materials, and we all know that housing is an issue right across Australia, so we're not unique. What makes it more difficult in King Island is that none of that construction or building materials is covered by the Freight Equalisation Scheme. So to build even the basic house here is extraordinarily expensive. So while we could talk about a whole range of aspects that aren't covered, these are just two critical issues. And so we do really want to, as the Mayor said, develop and expand our population from where we are now to maybe, gradually to 3,500. That would be fantastic. But at the moment, there's really if you go online to rent a house in King Island, nothing basically comes up. So I just know from our time here, the council's had to purchase houses to in fact staff our employees, and I know that a lot of companies, Tasports, the mine, they all do the same thing. So if we could make our economy more resilient in terms of housing as the first basic need of people, that would be an amazing outcome from this inquiry. So to expand to a lot of things, but in particular, if the Senate inquiry could look at those two aspects, the fuel and lubricants, but also construction and building materials, would be absolutely such a stimulus for the economy on King Island, and enable us as a council to have vacant land and then to encourage development to house the workforce. That would be incredible.
How do businesses here do the administrative side of it? Like, it can be quite a complex, especially if you're good at farming but you're not good at admin. How do people cope with that? Do you have a local agent? Do they outsource it?
My understanding, and the Mayor can perhaps answer this better than I, look, we do have our regional development, our CURDO, King Island Regional Development, and I do know that they help some businesses try and go through the rigours of applying for the freight. But it's very difficult, and a lot of people being people, don't like to ask for help. So, and we found that particularly in the drought, the recent drought support that had 20,000 for farmers that were struggling. And again, I mean, we appreciate that when you're giving community and public money, you just give it away. That's fine. But so it is quite complicated, and I think I know that some businesses say, and I heard this from from Flinders Island as well, it's just too complicated, and they just sort of give up on it. So it is if as the Mayor said, if the process could be streamlined, again, that would be really helpful.
If you were given a blank piece of paper, how would you design it? Like, I can envision it like you do a BAS statement. Any business, small business, medium, large, need to do some kind of taxation requirement throughout the year. What if it was incorporated into that? So that was my idea, sort of. Blank piece of paper, how would you do it?
Ooh, I'm not sure about that. I'd have to look at the criteria and make it as simple as possible. But you might have some ideas.
Yeah, look, I mean, as I said before, ideally, if it could be automatically, if there could be automatic application when you apply through recognised shippers to and from King Islands, or airlines or air freight providers or whatever else, whenever you receive a quote, ideally, whenever you receive a quote or whenever you buy an air ticket or whatever else to move stuff or yourself to and from King Island, if under the fees and charges automated, is automatically fed in a freight equalisation scheme rebate, which might therefore take off some of the overall sticker price of that fare or way bill or whatever else, and be automatically rolled into the point of sale. That would be ideal. Now, we do have the technology to be able to do that these days. There's got to be a way we can do that. But I'm also mindful of we don't want to overburden freight providers or airlines or whatever else with more T's and C's and more itemised costs that go on to the bottom of a ticket of any sort as well. So but there's a balance that we can find, I think, where the system can be automatically applied, and so the business or the individual or whatever it is, when they buy that freight movement or when they buy that air ticket or when they pay for that carton of whatever to be air freighted across to King Island, they, at the point of sale, they automatically receive that rebate as taken off the final price, and then they pay the obviously the adjusted price. That would be the ideal Rolls-Royce solution.
Sounds fine to me, but I don't do math. So on the island, though, you only have a couple of avenues to get stuff in and out. So it'd be Rex, Sharp, well, not Rex so much, but Sharp and all the freight, the shipping freight, yeah?
Yes.
And King Island, yeah.
Yeah.
You'll hear later today some great testimony from our shippers, and Sharp Airlines are on this afternoon as well, and our beef group and others. They'll have some fantastic evidence to present to you today that clearly articulates what is and isn't currently covered by the freight equalisation scheme, what we would like to see added to the freight equalisation scheme, and how the costings need to be contemporised and updated and the formulations updated to really give us the equity that we should be receiving in this day and age, given our disproportionate exposure to the current extremely high air costs and shipping costs to King Island.
I'll rotate, so we'll do it like on the Senate floor. Senator Urquhart.
Oh, thank you. Look, a couple of the questions that I had, particularly around the construction and building materials, you've answered, so that's fine. And the administration, but I think the issue of, you talked about the triangular service, and I know that's a really big issue here and that doesn't exist anymore, and I know that's a whole other argument around the harbour and the shipping and that sort of stuff, and the ships that can actually come into the harbour. But you've got in your submission around the air freight, and at the last item on that point talks about including air freight as a standard for short shelf life and other time-sensitive goods, so things like milk, bread, etc., that comes in by air freight. What would be the... I mean, one of the things that concerns me about that is that obviously people here are paying a lot more for those perishable goods. I suppose the issue is, how would you safeguard the fact that if TFES were to apply to those time-sensitive goods, then it then wasn't price gouged at the other end?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. Look, that's always the concern, isn't it? A contemporisation of this scheme relies upon good faith for all involved. We would closely monitor that to ensure that didn't happen. And also, customers vote with their feet, don't they? They know when they're being ripped off for whatever the reason or justification is, and they'll go elsewhere. But just to give a good example, and let's pick milk. Again, much to our consternation, we used to have lots and lots and lots of milk on King Island, but we don't so much anymore, so we have to bring it in. It has to be flown in by air freight. And currently 2 litres of milk sells in our supermarkets down the street here for $9. Whereas Coles, Aldi's, Woolies or whatever else, any more than $3 there, you wouldn't be happy. So, and the reason we're paying $9 for 2 litres of fresh milk is because of the air freight. So, you know, if a reasonable freight equalisation scheme update was able to make that milk $5 or $6 instead of $9, then that's a huge win, you know, for King Island straight away. And that's just one example. There are so many others. You could almost say the same thing for everything on a supermarket shelf, whether it comes by air freight or whether it comes by shipping. So obviously dry goods and other refrigerated items come in reefers on the ship, and others are air freighted in, like the example of milk. But it's yeah, there's you know. I think, again, with the right administration and with the right system set up for it to be implemented from the get-go, I think, and especially if it's itemised and highlighted on a given ticket or way bill or airfare or whatever else, then there's no possibility for a business operator to be able to take advantage of that, because it would stand out surely if they did.
Yeah. And I think you know our community very well, Anne, or Senator. And
Anne's fine, who I am.
And you know that they would speak up.
Yes.
So we have a very articulate community. They're very well connected. I suspect that if there was any price gouging, the Community Notice Board would know about it probably quicker than anybody else.
Yes.
So it's a very articulate, well-informed, well-networked community because of the isolation that we are in. So I think we'd know about it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. So I might leave mine there and give Richard a go, given we're short on time. So thank you.
On to you.
Thank you. I just want to go to the fuel costs, and you talked. I think you talked in your submission also about what's the right term? Your wharfage costs and your intermodal costs. Could you give us a little bit more information on that?
Certainly.
You go through a lot of movements and handling, and that obviously has an impact on the overall cost. But I'm also interested in the actual costs at each of the intermodal points, and what you've seen happen with those particular costs and how they input into the overall expense of moving product.
Sure, Senator. The picture as it currently stands is that bulk fuel is imported into, we'll take diesel and petrol, unleaded petrol, we'll take those two examples, and we'll leave LPG separate. bulk diesel and bulk petrol come in are bought in actually by Tasports. Tasports bring in the fuel in bulk, and Tasports have the bulk fuel facility here on King Island, and they operate and distribute fuel here on King Island, which is not necessarily their core business, but they've inherited the role here on King Island, and we're somewhat grateful for it. We don't have any large we don't have any large service station outlets here on King Island, like a Shell or an Ampol or anything like that. We have a couple of small local independent small businesses that sell fuel, and also Tasports will go and distribute bulk fuel to places like the council depot, the airport, large cattle farm operations that have fuel on site, etc., and whatever else. But for your average consumer or your visiting tourists or whatever else that needs to fill their car up here on the island, by the time they get to one of our two small independent service stations here in Curry, and there's one in Grassy, they're paying at the moment. I noticed last week actually fuel's gone down last week. It was $2.38 last week for petrol, which is the lowest it's been here for a while. I don't know how with what's happening in the world, etc. But in weeks prior to that, it was $2.61. So it makes it, obviously it's very expensive and would definitely be the most expensive in Tasmania, and I think would be up there for the rest of the country as well. I'd like to see some comparisons from the outback as to what they're currently paying, but I imagine it's somewhere in the realm of what we're paying here, yet we're so close to everything. We're so close to Tasmania, we're so close to Melbourne, it's... and the volume of freight that's moving across Bass Strait in all directions is huge. But when it comes out to us, it falls off a cliff, and due to the current inequities of the freight equalisation scheme, we pay a disproportionate premium for everything, fuel included. So with freight equalisation relating to bulk fuel coming into King Island, etc., and better and more efficient shipping arrangements or increased quantities of fuel, that might allow us to attract a proper service station operator in the future, like a Shell, Ampol, whoever, that might be able to bring better economies of scale to King Island if the logistics are there to do so. So that's my thinking out loud, Senator. Does that answer your question?
Not really. I was looking more at the actual costs and what visibility you have of the costs and the intermodal port costs, effectively. So you've got the shipping costs, and the design of the freight equalisation scheme looks at the shipping cost, but it also has a component that looks at intermodal costs, which is port costs and handling. And I was just curious as what you might have seen with respect to the port handling costs. But if you haven't got those, that's fine. I can chase. Yeah,
that's a question I can't answer. And again, not picking on Tasports, because we do have a very good working relationship with Tasports, and by and large they provide King Island with very good services. But because the fuel is bought to King Island by Tasports, and it's not their core business, and distributed by Tasports on King Island, which isn't their normal core business, they're not as transparent as a larger fuel provider would be, perhaps, and so I'm not aware of the current figures and those current costs. But perhaps someone who's coming on later today to testify may be able to give you more fidelity on that.
Curdo would probably have more of a...
Yes. Yeah, Greg Morris from Curdo, I think, may have a good handle on that detail. And they recently changed their operating model too, as to how they, the price of the day arrangements and other things with whoever their larger fuel provider is. Tasports recently changed their buying arrangement for fuel, and it led to high costs here on the island.
Okay, all right. Do you know how many locals use claim agents? Your discussion in point 5 of your submission talks about the number of who have high volume claims, but also might use claim agents. Do you know how many people here locally might use claim agents? I was also after some information on how many claim agents there were. We might have to do that through another mechanism through the inquiry, but.
I think, to my mind, Senator, I think really a couple of our larger shipping operators here, like Jim McKenzie Agencies and others, would be claim agents, because it's their core business. It's the very nature of their business, and they want to see discounts passed on to their loyal customers, etc. There wouldn't be more than a couple here, I wouldn't imagine. And again, hopefully someone who's coming on to testify later in the day will be able to answer that question for you specifically, but only a few. I imagine there would be some instances where someone wants to move freight on or off King Island for whatever reason, and they're not aware that they can get a current freight equalisation scheme benefit for it, and a good forward-leaning agent like Mackenzie's or others would inform them that you are eligible to receive a rebate on this as it currently stands, and help them complete that paperwork and highlight what the saving will be to them, etc., to look after their customers.
I just want to go back to the air freight matter that was raised earlier. What proportion of the costs for King Island Airport does the council actually recover?
At the moment, our airport is running, operating our airport is operating at a slight loss at the moment. We took on some loans a while back to expand our terminal as well as our freight shed for air cargo. We almost paid those loans off, and at the moment the airport is currently operating slightly at a loss-making position. It has broken even in the past, and it has gone into the black slightly, and of course we desperately wanted to go into the black as far as a sustainable operating model is concerned, and to make more investments into our airport. And we're hopeful we'll be able to do that as throughput and passenger numbers increase. And again, with improvements to something like the freight equalisation scheme for Tasmania, if that incentivises and brings more people and allows more people to travel to and from King Island, that will help us in many ways.
So what is the bulk of the income from the airport? How is that derived? Is it a passenger charge? Is it a per kilo freight charge? How is it?
Sorry, through the mayor. With the exception of Rex, it's a landing fee, and the council's just looking at whether it should move to some combination of landing and perhaps passenger fee. But Rex is the only airline, so it would be the landing fees predominantly.
So you said with the exception of Rex, it's not the first time I've heard that. What is the story with Rex? What do they pay? Do they pay a landing fee or a passenger fee?
They at the moment pay.
Or is it a negotiated amount?
The passenger fee.
Yeah, a while back with us, they negotiated a bespoke arrangement where they pay per passenger volume into and out of King Island, not a set landing fees and charges that we charge other airlines.
Okay.
So a cargo aircraft, like with Sharp, and you'll have the CEO of Sharp Airlines in here later today, in spite of how much freight or cargo is and the weight of that aircraft, we will only charge them a landing fee and a call-out fee if required for if they're after hours or something along those lines. So we desperately want to see our airport get into the black and become profitable, but that's not going to happen until we have increased volumes and throughput and increased economies of scale. In the meantime, we are forced to incur the loss-making position of our airport because of its criticality to us, and we own and operate it.
So what would be the cost to the ratepayers of the airport as it currently stands?
At the moment, the airport runs at a loss of just under $500,000. However, half of that would be depreciation, which of course is a non-cash item, but nonetheless is part of the equation.
Well, it's based on being able to renew the asset as
Exactly.
it's required, isn't it?
Yep.
I mean, that's the point of that. But
That's right.
You can't live without the airport either.
No.
relatively critical piece of infrastructure in the overall scheme of things. The other point that I wanted to make, which quite struck me when I was reading through your submission, was you mentioned building materials and building costs on the island and the additional cost of freight as a component of the total cost, which then flows on into additional costs for the council with respect, say, for the training levy, where you pay it on the cost of the project, and yet let's call it a net cost of a building inflated by something of the order of $80,000 because you have to bring all the materials onto the island. Have you had any conversations with those that are involved in the training levy charges to have some sort of equalisation on that process? That's a 17% cost of project is freight. It's fairly significant. A similar conversation to what I was having on Flinders Island a couple of weeks ago. But then to have a levy charged at a percentage of building cost, it disproportionately charges the island with respect to the training, and I'm assuming that for the training you still have to buy an airfare to fly off the island anyway, so you're paying the cost there as well. So it's sort of double or triple whammy to a certain extent.
Yeah. Welcome to our world, Senator. Hence, our concerns and consternation at the moment about the inequities of the extant scheme and our overwhelming desire to want to see it improved, not only for us but for the benefit of all Tasmania and for the benefit of the Australian economy. Because again, if things are being stifled or held back here on King Island as a result of this, no doubt the rest of Tasmania is as well. And there's the potential here to really unleash Tasmania's economic power if we get a revised scheme correct and achieve the equity we hope to achieve.
Marcus, I would love to maintain the question for yourself.
I'm going to call it quits there, 'cause I do.
We can put questions on notice, which there is a reporting date for, correct me if I'm wrong, the 22nd or 24th? It's on my do-by. 25th of October 2024, so if you had any questions on notice, that's one of the answers we would like to have back. But we thank you so much for coming in and highlighting how the TFS really does impact on King Island from a council perspective.
Thank you, Senator, and to other senators. Again, thanks for coming to King Island here and visiting us in person. We greatly appreciate it. Today's a fantastic opportunity.
We'll all come back. I think Anne comes back more than all of us.
I think she does.
Fantastic opportunity today. We thank you for your time and great to meet you in person. And if we can be of any more assistance or service along the way, or as you finalise ultimate deliberations and outcomes from this review, we're at your disposal. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Okay, so now we call the King Island Beef Producers Group to the table. Thank you for gentle approach.
You got COVID or something, Roger? You got COVID or something?
Okay, so I now welcome representatives of the King Island Beef Producers Group. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to the Senate committee has been provided to yourselves. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today? Starting left to right, maybe?
Nathan Conley, beef producer on King Island.
Met your wife yesterday.
Yes, you did. Hi, how are you?
Roger Clemens, representing the beef group for Nick Little, who's not here, and I'm the TFGO of Tas Farmers Meat Council rep for the island.
Paul Clemens, I'm part of the King Island Beef Producers Group.
Cameron Morris, part of the King Island Beef Producers Group, a producer and involved in fertiliser freight and contracting.
Thank you. Would you like to make a short statement, or do you have one that we could put into answer?
I'm happy to. Thanks for the opportunity. This is probably my third involvement in a freight equalisation review. But anyway, you live in hope. The objective of TFES is to provide Tasmanian industries with equal opportunities to compete in the marketplace, which I'm sure you're well aware, seeing three of you are Tasmanian representatives. I have had a brief discussion with John Berry from JBS, which most of our beef go to, and I understand, has been in touch with you, Senator. He and I sort of agree that the TFS previous reviews and the Productivity Commission of 10 years ago is still very relevant, except the freight rates have gone upwards and the subsidy that is applied to TFS has stayed the same, basically. I assume you know the shipping arrangements for King Island, but I'll go through it because there seems to be some misunderstanding in various areas. So I don't know whether you've had this information already, but
Good to get it on the
Yeah.
record.
We were
Okay.
probably going to ask you anyway, but yeah.
right, well, we're totally reliant on shipping, as you would know. It's currently serviced by Bass Island Lines, which is Tasports, operating between Devonport and King Island and return, and Eastern Shipping Lines, which is out of Stanley, and that provides Greenhams with their livestock. There are ad hoc trips to Port Welshpool, and you need to be lucky to be on that voyage. There's no advanced warning, so you can get really organised. And I'll just give one example. I've just brought bulls in from Victoria. Normally, we used to go direct here. I was very lucky to get the ship from Port Welshpool to here. Last year, they came to Devonport and transshipped to King Island, double the freight rate. The TFES claim was across Bass Strait to Devonport, not for me. I think the productivity report does recommend coastal shipping reform, but it's not going to happen. The reality is it's not going to happen. So we're left with TFES. And as you can see from these guys, I'll tell you, our freight rates, because of the system in place, I know it's a state-run shipping arrangement, all we've got left is TFES. And I know shipping's a constant discussion over 40 years that I've been in this. This time it's really serious because the freight rates we're getting charged now are just beyond this island's capacity to keep moving forward. So I hope you take it on note, and King Island, I believe, is a special case, as was recommended in a previous TFS review, Furno Group and us. I believe there's a very good case for us to be treated as a special case TFES. Thanks.
Thank you. So we're going to rotate the call, but and we'll do it like we do on the Senate floor, but I'll go first if that's okay. Basically, the freight equalisation scheme is not actually equalising the cost, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so, and it hasn't been given CPI any improvement to actually bring it up to par with like your mainland, friends who have highways and rail transport to get their product there. How do you actually access the freight equalisation scheme? Do you do the admin yourself or do you use an agent?
With livestock, I deal with JBS.
Yep.
The arrangement is made that we pay $150 plus GST, and the bill comes to us or off our account, and the TFES is claimed by JBS. Okay. If it's a bull that comes here, I pay the account, they send the form to me, and I claim directly. And with fertiliser, it's the same. I pay the freight and the product, obviously, and they send me the TFES forms, and I make the claim. So they're individual, and JBS do it as a company.
Does that feel clunky in your opinion?
It works well because if you're sending cattle at various stages, you're not doing it every week. It's sort of another administrative job. But we've got enough paperwork to do these days. I'm happy to leave it with them as long as it's clear what's going on.
Okay. Do you feel that...
By them, do you mean JBS?
JBS, yeah. I'm not sure what Greenhams do because I haven't dealt with them.
So you trust the administrative process of JBS Swift, which is an offshore company?
I keep sending my cattle to them because they run the King Island beef brand. And I'm happy with the way they run it.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel that, you have a lot of additional things, like the drought that would have impacted on your business, getting stock feed in, but also you would have had to, as the Mayor mentioned, you dispersed more product because you couldn't feed it and look after it. How do you think the TFES is going to help you recover in the next year? I don't know if that's that clearly, but...
I'll acknowledge one thing the TFES did in July. They agreed to southbound assistance for charitable organisations to bring stock feed in. Yep. So there was an acknowledgement of that. Yep. But going to Victoria's extremely expensive, and we're missing out on a price that's not in Tasmania because it's greater on the mainland, and it's not a reliable service. So I know with the drought, a number of farmers were 8 to 10 weeks out trying to get their cattle off the island, but TFES would help, but really that was a shipping issue with no direct sailing to Victoria.
How would the freight route look in your perfect world?
Pardon?
How would the freight route look like in your perfect world?
Well, in my lifetime farming here, we've always had direct access to Victoria to trade, and that's where the traditional trade was. With the current setup, we haven't got a reliable, regular, scheduled service, and I think that's killing the island. But I know that's a state issue, but you are the state senators.
We are.
That's all I can say.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that Anne and Richard have been working towards that a lot moving forward. When did the shipping route fall apart exactly? When did between the islands and Melbourne and Tasmania and mainland? When did all that fall apart? Excuse my ignorance.
Well,
2017.
2017 was it? Yeah.
So basically, business
Well,
has been failing since then.
Sea Road Mersey used to trade
Yeah.
and call in here once a week, and if you needed 10 containers of fertiliser, they could bring them in one hit.
Yeah,
If you needed cattle going out with 20 trailers, they could take them.
yeah,
Current system is we're limited to what trailers we can get on. If you get a trailer in here, so you get 10 trailers in on the Bass Island lines, then there's no fertiliser or groceries don't turn up,
yeah.
and it's only a scheduled service once a week. So we're that doesn't help either efficiencies of the whole operation. I mean, even access to the wharf is an issue at times.
So you're pretty much hog-tied.
Well, you may as well say it's a monopoly, and we've got very little power to do much. But when the drought was on, just for your information, we needed two trips a week out of Devonport. If it wasn't for the Premier to tell Tasports to do it, they weren't interested. On the first sailing, I got a message to say there's no freight. I rang to check because I knew there was. There were 55 trailers waiting in a queue to get to King Island with feed, everything else. And that's the message we got from Tasport. So we got straight back to the minister, and they pulled their heads in. But you know, that's the sort of stuff we get.
You're reliant on your relationship with your elected members.
Basically, in that situation, yes.
Okay. Anne, Senator Urquhart?
Yeah, thank you. There's sort of an elephant in the room here. We're talking about TFES, but we're actually talking about shipping as well, because the two are really interlinked, aren't they? And given that triangular service ceased in 2017, and particularly when I can remember sitting in Portside Links one Sunday morning watching the Sea Road Mersey come in, much bigger boat, much more applicable to the will of Bass Strait and particularly around the sea around King Island. So it's really, I mean, I understand the issue around TFES and the problems around, or the issues that people are raising around that, but there is a bit of a catch-22 situation with an inept, if I can call it an inept or inadequate perhaps would be a better term, of shipping arrangement for the goods that you need to bring in and out, and not having that triangular service. So I also wanted to ask a question in relation to Eastern Line. So we've got Bass Island Line, which is part owned by the Tasmanian State Government, and that is then subsidised obviously by the government. We've got Eastern Line, which I think is part owned by Greenham, is my understanding. Now, I'm not sure whether you can correct me or whatever, but my understanding is that if cattle is moved on Eastern Line to other areas other than Greenham or JBS, then they're not moved, they're not given priority. Is that your understanding?
Greenhams have the most say of what happens on eastern shipping lines,
Right, because
with
they're
regard
part
to
owners.
livestock.
Yeah.
And that I did ask that question of bloke in charge of eastern shipping lines.
Yeah.
And he said they're my big customer. I'd basically do what they say,
Yeah.
in quotes, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's obviously an issue. So I guess the issue is around how do we get a solution out of this? We know obviously that the TFES, as everyone has put in their submissions, hasn't sort of kept up with the times. That's what I'm reading in all the submissions. But also the issue is, particularly for King and Flinders Island, is losing that triangular service.
Well, definitely King Island.
Definitely King Island, because you ship a lot more
Well,
goods and
traditionally,
cattle.
and particularly groceries and
Yeah,
timber and posts and
yes,
all that, and Inside Tech
yes,
out of Geelong was
yeah,
far superior product, if
yeah,
I might say.
yeah. So I guess my question is, if King Island was able to be serviced with a triangular service again, and I know that's not this inquiry, but it does interlink into the Tasmanian Freight Equalisation scheme, what would be needed to deal with the freight equalisation scheme in that example?
Well, I believe there should be one shipping service that does a triangular, like the Sea Road Mersey
Yep,
was a
like it
perfect
used to.
example.
Yep,
And that cut out that freight leg. So we only have one freight into King Island
yep,
from Melbourne
yep,
and back again. One trip into Tassie,
yep,
and we did have a reverse sailing. Actually, originally Sea Road used to go the other way.
Yes.
We'd go straight to Melbourne. Then
yes.
they changed it
Come back. Yep.
because they wanted to be honest, they wanted us to supply cattle to processors in Tassie.
Yes.
That's what that was about.
Yep, yep,
But we could handle that.
yep,
And it also gave us the opportunity when the mainland were in tight situations, drought, etc.
Yep.
We actually imported stores here to fatten and process.
Yep.
Well, they processed here
yep.
back in those days, but that's changed. But I just think splitting the freight between the two ships has caused us probably more problems than.
Yeah, so the loss of the Sea Road Mersey and now having both ships and, as I think the Mayor said, but you've also said, is that it's open to not even turning up if the weather's really, really bad. And I did note, some of the products that get knocked about significantly if the weather's pretty bad, and I remember the southbound feed that came in
nearly
not so long ago. It was pretty rough. I think those guys had a pretty horrendous trip over on that night. I actually couldn't even get here for that event because the planes were all cancelled. But some of the things that you've got in your submission is around the fact that there hasn't been a review of the scheme. So there is a review every 4 years, and that was implemented in 2015, but it actually commenced in 2019. So can you tell me what, if anything, you're seeing as a result of those reviews every 4 years?
Can I defer to
Yeah, absolutely.
these guys?
Yes.
They've done the maths on.
Yep, sure, please.
Just because
Yep.
I've had a little.
Yeah, give them a chance to have a go, yeah.
Sick of hearing me.
Who wants to go? Thor?
Sorry, say the question again.
So in terms of the review, one of your, in your submission it says there has not been a review of the scheme since the southbound leg from King Island to Tasmania was added in 2007.
Yeah.
There is a 4-yearly review that commenced it was noted in 2015, but commenced in 2019. So do you think there's been any, I know that there were some people from the department on the island back in September to take information about that. I don't know how broadly they've seen people or whatever, but part of that review coming up, do you think there will be any benefit from that review at all?
I personally haven't been involved in that review. But
Right. Has anybody that you know of from the Beef Producers Group? Did anybody meet with anyone from the department?
I think Tasmanian did.
Yep.
I think I was away on that one when they came here.
Yes.
Most of us directed it to the TFTA.
Right, okay, yeah,
So they would probably
yeah.
be better equipped to answer that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, no, that's fine. So I think from what I take out of your submission, the sort of, I think the triangular shipping service seems to be the number one sort of issue. Is that a reasonable sort of?
And a ship that can handle Bass Strait a bit
Yes.
better than the current.
Yeah, yeah,
Because they're actually landing craft,
Yeah.
technically speaking.
yeah. So a decent ship and the triangular service, that's sort of the key thing for you guys. And obviously then the TFES sort of flows in under that. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all we've got now is TFES.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So the TFES was designed to equalise,
Yes,
and basically nothing's changed with it. So when it was introduced, obviously the TFES pricing was set,
Yeah.
and it was substantially a fair bit of your freight component.
Yeah.
Where now freight's just increased every year.
Yeah.
Yes, we've gone from a ocean-bearing vessel in the sea road
Yeah.
to what we have today.
Yeah.
But then unfortunately the pricing has just kept climbing,
Yeah.
and the TFES has stayed the same.
yeah, so the gap's got bigger.
If a review's happened, well, nothing's changed,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's still the same price as it was when it was
Yeah.
incorporated.
yeah,
But now we're dealing with all the shipping issues, but the number one thing is we're dealing with a system that's broken,
yeah,
and it's not fair. Like, the national highway was to go from Victoria to Tasmania, and we're a part of that national highway.
Yeah.
And the idea was that if you had a point A and a point B in kilometre terms, you could drive from there to there, and the price would be the same as if you flipped it and went Melbourne to wherever. And we just don't have that. It's just for some comparable figures. If you were to drive a truck from Grassy to Brooklyn Abattoirs in Victoria, it would cost you $63.78 a head. Currently, if we were to do it through Victoria, through Welshpool and Eastern Line, it's $272 a head.
yeah. So a significant difference.
And then if you're working on Tasmania, even though the water leg is shorter, the road leg is slightly longer, which
Yeah.
would work out 335 kilometres, you'd be paying $72.43 a head.
Yeah.
And we're paying $150 a head after the TFES rebate.
Yes.
So that figure's probably more 180 plus.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
the gap's sort of wide.
The gap's just blown out.
And the capacity of the shipping has sort of exacerbated the fact that you don't have that shipping available to be as efficient as that could be either. Is that a fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we also don't have the ability to pursue other markets.
Yes.
So we are pigeonholed
Absolutely.
with our kill cattle into Tassie.
Yep,
And there's nothing, like, normally the price is pretty competitive,
Yep.
but there is times of the year where you need to move cattle
Yep.
and you can't, because obviously Tassie being isolated, we have to go through Tassie,
Yep.
and we don't have that avenue to shift and to move sideways on where we want to go. So
This is a pretty huge pothole in the highway, though.
so very
Absolutely.
quickly, Mr Morris, you're a fertiliser distributor as well, or
involved.
importer or whatever.
Correct.
So is that the similar sort of story for you?
Yeah, that's right. So I suppose only being quite new into the fertiliser space, it's probably more so just seeing that the prices haven't, like, obviously we're seeing freight prices increase in the last 12 months through Bass Island Line twice already, basically. There's definitely inefficiencies of we're bringing in bulker fertiliser containers in. Unlike Tasmania, we don't have a market for filled containers going back out, so we also have to wear that cost.
Yep.
Whereas quite often you may actually have more demand for containers back in Melbourne as
Right,
well.
so the backhaul stuff.
Yeah,
you
and
don't get the opportunity
it really
to do.
depends on
Yeah.
where the demand is as well.
Yeah.
And obviously there is probably more fertiliser plants in Victoria available, namely out of Geelong. But probably as a producer side, there is significant, obviously the cost of fertiliser, and like it's a very high input cost on King Island, and the freight really is nearly, after farming in Victoria for some time as well, it's nearly debilitating as far as the total cost of production.
Great, thank you, thanks, Chair.
We're about to switch. Thank you, Senator Urquhart. Can I ask just a quick transition question? Do you think the consumers that are getting your cattle, et cetera, in Tasmania and on the mainland actually understand how you're being hindered by this freight equalisation scheme deficiency and it's going on their costs in the supermarket?
No, I think we're producing a commodity quite often.
Okay. But they have no clue that the...
Does that make sense? Like, there's probably no real...
No, because they're
Coming off your profit rather than going on.
yeah, it's coming off. It's coming off our productivity.
It's a
Then
bit like the supermarkets where you have to provide the product for whatever
That's right.
price they give you
Yeah.
and suck it up pretty much.
well,
That's
that's happening to us here.
Yeah.
When we go to the supermarket here, I don't know if you
I was looking at your scotch. It looks pretty good.
if you go to the supermarket here, you'll see that the prices are heavily inflated because the cost to here is the worst. So the people off the island probably aren't being affected because we're wearing it,
Yeah.
but the people definitely here, we're wearing it because there's no the TFES sort of equalisation's not there for us.
But how long can you absorb it?
How do you absorb it?
No, how long can you?
That's why we're here.
Yeah. All right, Senator Colbeck, I
Yeah.
apologise.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, effectively, just to continue that conversation, you're paying twice because it costs you as a producer through less return because of the higher freight cost to get your product to wherever it's got to go. And then when it comes back again, so your cube roll is way more expensive than it might be somewhere else because of the cost to get it on the island. So you effectively, to sell your own product to your own community, pay twice.
$140 for a big slab of scotch.
You talked a moment ago about, or your submission says 40,000 head of cattle off the island on an annual basis. I think, Mr Clements, you talked about that there used to be some come on. Are there still animals come on the island? How many?
Coming onto the island, only stud cattle now.
Only, sorry?
Only stud cattle,
Stud cattle, okay.
bulls.
So where once upon a time you might bring animals across to finish or to grow out, that doesn't happen anymore because of cost?
No, because the service, because we can't go to Victoria and get them. There's no point in getting them out of Tassie because we're in the sort of similar boat of climate. But
Okay.
previously we did import livestock to fatten.
And so the service has limited your capacity, therefore your overall production capacity?
The opportunity does not arise, whereas other producers in Tassie or mainland have got that opportunity.
Basically can't do it because the cost to buy it off the mainland, by the time it gets to King Island, your margin's nearly gone in freight.
Yep.
So I think if you have a look on our submission, it sort of gives you an idea of the cost per head in freight to do it. So
The trailer to Port Worshippable is pretty scary.
yeah.
Yep.
So if you're bringing something, if you're buying an animal in Victoria and bringing it to King Island, your margin's already cut by that cost. Now you could opportunistically buy out of Tassie, but it's if you're going to buy out of there, you might as well buy on island.
Okay.
Yeah.
The submission talks about, in the third dot point, has resulted in a lower level of products that King Island producers can claim TFES for. Which products are you talking about there, or is it?
So if a product goes from Melbourne to Devonport, it can be claimed because that's the southbound leg.
Yep.
But because then it gets off there and then comes to King Island, you cannot claim it. That's what I'm.
Okay, so it's effectively a lower proportion of the overall cost that gets claimed because you can only claim it once, not for each voyage, for each voyage. Okay, all right. Thank you. I just want to go to the council submission where it talks about a March 2012 freight cost being recovering 28% of a livestock trailer to now, in February this year, recovering 15% of a livestock trailer. Is that relatively indicative, do you think? I mean, this is evidence of the decay of the equalisation component of the scheme.
I'd agree with that based on the sheep trailer scenario here.
So I actually have some trailer costs here from a man that's documented the price increases over the last 12 years of sending his sheep to Victoria, which has now led him to actually get out of sheep. So I'm more than happy to.
If you're happy to table that, we'd be pleased to receive. I mean, that's a clear indication of the loss of business opportunity because of the lack of the system keeping up with.
Well, there's for the man who supplied that, TQM's the only spot in that he can send his sheep, and if they're full, he's got no.
Oh, okay.
He's
so
got
it's
no
capacity and price.
Yep. But he's documented that out of his own business where he's shipped sheep on and off King Island over the last 12 years, and it gives you an insight into different spots throughout Victoria as well as Tassie, as well as TQM in Tasmania where he's supplied, and Well,
I'm happy to move the committee accept that as a document to be tabled.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that very quickly, Richard? Can you just step us through? So the top line is 6,030 to 1,710. Just explain that whole line so that I'm really clear on what it means.
right, so he's obviously transported his sheep with Hodge Transport on March 2012.
Yep.
The total cost of the trailer from farm gate to Kyneton, which would have been can't think of the processor there, but that's a processor in Kyneton.
Okay.
So it would have cost him 6,030 minus the 1,710. That's your
minus.
TFES. So
Yep.
that's your TFES there. So his total expense was 4320.
So a better example would be going down to March 2013 at 6,300 with 1,710 TFES rebate with a net cost of 4,590. But if you go down to page at the bottom going to TQM, the total cost of freight is 9,709 less 1,710, which shows that TFES hasn't moved, and a 7,999 net cost for him to move his sheep.
Which is bonkers.
And is that
So-
the same
Another
head
example.
of-
Sorry.
Is that the same number of head of sheep? Does that be?
Yeah, it'd be roughly.
Yeah.
It would be roughly.
That'd
the
be a
same.
trailer load.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A trailer.
It'd be a full trailer,
That's
because
great.
there's
Okay,
you
thanks.
can't split load.
No, because if it's half empty, you're still paying the same amount.
Pay the price of the trailer.
Yeah.
So a trailer comes in full.
Great.
A trailer comes in empty, it goes out full because
Yeah.
you just,
Got it. Thank you.
Another example
Can
is the Victorian
Sorry.
League, which is going to Kyneton and Ararat not being probably road freight wise would be probably marginal, I'd say. So an example of 28%, it's covering 28% of the top line of Hodge in March 2012, and probably Hodge in February 2024 with a price of $11,650.
Which so third bottom line.
That's right, and probably shows that the movement to Victoria, where there is obviously, especially for sheep, there's a lot better processing facilities, and it's really put them out of business, basically.
So just one final question, because I really do want to break down the elements of this as well, which form part of the overall cost. So you've got your actual freight cost, but you also have intermodal costs. Do you have any visibility of those? So I'm talking about port costs and handling costs at the ports. And where they fit. So, I mean, these figures give us a total erosion in the total equalisation cost. But I'm very curious to understand what's happening with respect to what the port costs are as a component of this, and I would just like to know if you've got any information on that with you that could help the committee in that sense.
I'll answer that. I have got a copy of the closest costings from Bass Island Line as I can, which it wasn't easy to get information out of them. They just declined, really. So it's not an overall picture of the costings, but yeah, it does give you their costs, their fuel, the infrastructure levy, Devonport wharfage, King Island wharfage, and the cost per trailer to get it here, and I'm happy to pass that on.
I'd be very happy to receive those so that we can perhaps look at those further. I mean, I don't know how many conversations I've had on this island about fuel costs and the black box of the system of costs, which
What's the cost to take it on?
is part of the conversation we've had before. But Mr. Morris, do you have any information, or is there anything that might be available in a historical sense in relation to fertiliser?
Probably something we'd be able to follow up on.
Well, can I ask you to take that on notice?
That photocopy.
Because I think we can talk about the shipping cost,
Yeah, straightforward.
but the intermodal costs, I think, are also really important elements of this. And there's been a bit of pointing at that over time, and I'm just a bit concerned about the actual port issues, and perhaps even the willingness of the ports or the companies that are operated through the ports to work with the communities in respect of service delivery, which goes to the point that Senator Urquhart was talking about in respect of what the service is as opposed to how much it costs. And there's a couple of elements to it from a King Island perspective in that sense.
It would be interesting to see Bass Island Line and Tasport's cost of operation for the boat. Like if that was able to be gotten a hold of, because
The journey.
yeah, well, their total cost per annum, cost per journey, cost per annum. Like if you could actually get the John Dygans cost of operation, then you'll be able to work out a breakdown of what it's actually costing, where the money's going. Is it going in labour component? Is it going in wharfage, fuel? No one's ever got that. So it was hard enough to get that piece of paper out of Bass Island Line.
Cool. I think we're going to do a little bit more of investigating
Well,
with
I'd be
that.
happy to receive that as
Yeah, we're very happy to
as a
receive
document
that.
as well.
Thank you so
Maybe for the
much.
committee to do.
Even from one side of Devonport, when a container comes in
Yeah.
to Devonport, to take it to the other side, to our ship, it was $100. Well, we're going to check up what it does cost.
Yeah.
It's between 100 and 200 at the moment just to take it from one side to the other. So there's one. And I think
From Sea Road over
Sea
Bass
Road,
Island Line.
which is just across the river.
Skip, hop and a jump.
So how many, in that sense, how many port fees would you pay? Would you pay one port fee or more than one port fee?
Well, Campbell, no. Wharfage Melbourne, Wharfage Devonport, Wharfage Devonport, Wharfage King Island, Wharfage again King Island, go back to Devonport, Wharfage at Devonport, yeah.
So to be honest, like getting an invoice from Bass Island Line looks like you bought a new car as far as the little add-ons. So you do have your wharfage on both sides. You have an infrastructure levy and your fuel surcharge levy, and quite often something else. And if
It's a bit like the fight we had a few years ago as a state with Melbourne ports when they wanted to charge for a container when it arrived and then when it left.
Yep.
So you would pay for when something arrives and then when it leaves.
Yep.
At
That's
the
right.
Port.
And you also have obviously storage fees as well. So when, say, weather being very weather permitting, so we've got 10 containers on the wharf at the moment waiting for spreaders to spread, and they'll be incurring a daily charge as well once they're over there 7 days. And that's just the nature of the season, really. So quite often we can get high, like a lot of wind and spreading conditions aren't good, and we just can't actually physically get the job done. So then you do have obviously, storage of containers on their port.
More milking goes on in Tasports than there does on King Island.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. We do have to wrap up. I'm so sorry we are running late, but it's been great having your evidence and I appreciate it. I don't know if you had any questions on notice, but reporting...
I do.
Yeah, I think we would like some more information about all of what you said, if you could provide it to us at some point, and we're going to chase this up too. But reporting date is the 25th of October for answers to the questions taken on notice. Look, thank you so much, gentlemen. We truly appreciate you being here. We're going to take a 15-minute break, come back in. We have apologised to our next people that we're running a little bit over.
Could I? On a trip to Tasmania full of cattle,
Yep.
Bass Island line struck tide and wind and didn't progress. It went backwards. It arrived in Devonport. It didn't arrive in time for MSA grading. So we were at the mercy of, but they got an exemption to grade them. But they were there a day longer than they should have been. They should have been in, killed and gone.
And that's money out of
And
it.
that, well, we're not sure whether they would have graded better or worse. We can't prove either way. But
Right.
we've faced that a couple, every time you face it, you have a heart attack, put it that way.
Sorry.
Well, that's the ship,
Yeah.
and I swore it'd never happen again, but it has happened.
Well, you can't fight.
It's happened to me twice anyway, so.
Thank you so much,
Anyway.
Mr. Clemens. I appreciate your time. And we'll now break for morning tea. Thank you. Welcome representatives. Wow, chocolate cake got to me. King Island Regional Development Organisation, King Island Shipping Group and the King Island Chamber of Commerce. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you for the Hansard record. Will you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear today? Left to right, maybe? Or my left to right?
Yeah. So I'm Sophie Oster. I'm working at King Island Stockfits here and am the general manager there, with Audrey Hamer being the owner, which is sitting next to me. Yeah, that's all I want to.
Yeah, so Audrey Hamer, owner of King Island Stockfeeds and King Island Bakery.
Thank you.
I'm Heidi Waitchins, representing the King Island Chamber of Commerce as president, and I'm also a local business owner
Thank
and
you.
native King Islander.
Yay, even more important.
Yeah. Greg Morris here representing King Island Shipping, also Chamber of Commerce and Curdo, a farmer as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cameron Morris, representing a primary producer and fertiliser freight.
Nathan Conley, primary producer.
Philip Marnie, manager of Elders.
Amanda Marnie, SSO at Elders King Island, and I'd say that I do more claims for TFES than anyone in the world.
You're the one that we need then. I now invite you to make a short statement, or have you tabled a submission from Curdo, etc.?
We've tabled a submission for the Chamber of Commerce, and I also have a late submission from the King Island Seafoods and King Island Nursery and Florist.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so I have a copy of it here, but today, if I have permission to read out points about their submission after my own introduction.
Yep, so do you have a collective opening statement? Yeah, an opening statement. Or have you done a collective one? That's probably what I'm trying to ask, sorry.
The Chamber has a statement. I've got a present from the shipping component.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you'd like to start, that'd be great.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Yeah, it's very hard to hear you.
Sorry.
Oh, apologies. Opening statements, if you would like to do one.
Certainly, yes.
Thank you.
Now?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Would you like me to stay seated?
Yes,
Yep,
please.
Okay. Good morning, senators, committee members and everyone present. I am Heidi Waitchins, President of the King Island Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and on behalf of our entire island community, I warmly welcome you all to King Island and extend our heartfelt gratitude for your commitment to being here today. Your presence reflects a genuine dedication to understanding the unique challenges we face regarding the Tasmanian Equalisation scheme, which I'll refer to as the TFES. This inquiry into the TFES is crucial for our economic survival. Essential updates are needed to maintain its effectiveness amid our current realities. The King Island Chamber of Commerce speaks not only just for our members, but a wide array of businesses, from small enterprises to non-profits. Many of us are volunteers on this island. We're a very kind, caring community. We're passionate about ensuring our island remains a place where businesses thrive and families enjoy a good, quality, affordable way of life. King Island is characterised by its remote location, unpredictable weather and limited transport options. These conditions lead to rising freight and travel costs, impacting market access, business sustainability and the livelihoods of our residents, touching every aspect of life here. Freight costs are significant barriers to economic growth. They affect everyone from farmers, small businesses, family and essential services. We urge you to seriously consider our recommendations to expand goods eligibility and support air freight and passenger transportation. I'll probably add a please to that one. Streamlining administrative processes and indexing assistance to reflect inflation will allow us to compete on a level playing field. Ongoing monitoring of Bass Strait shipping and associated costs is critical. Identifying cost reduction opportunities will provide the relief our community needs in enabling King Island businesses to operate sustainably and competitively. Firstly, reviewing and adjusting intermodal costs, unchanged since 1998, we believe, is imperative to make the scheme more equalised, if you know what I'm saying. Tying the TFES assistance to the Consumer Price Index ensures its real-term value. Streamlining administration by cutting red tape and leveraging digital tools can ease the business burden significantly. Air freight must become a regular TFES feature. It is our critical transport link. Expanding eligibility to cover fresh produce and products and essentials like fresh milk for us to consume is flown in. I encourage you to go to the supermarket and buy a couple of litres today. Simplifying processes with upfront rebates could dramatically alleviate cash flow issues. Reclassifying exporters to ensure fair compensation reflecting current realities is essential. Automating a fair reimbursement for added transshipment costs will reduce the burden of manual applications. We all have more important things to spend our valuable time on. Rapid TFES adaptation mechanisms will ensure King Island remains livable and vibrant. The TFES is a lifeline for King Island, but it must evolve to better support our community. By confronting these challenges, it can help our island not only just survive but thrive. While on King Island, I encourage the committee to further engage with locals from all industries and walks of island life and gain insights to inform your decisions and reiterate what we're presenting here today. Thank you all for your time, willingness to listen and commitment to these critical issues. I'm hopeful that through your support and collaboration, we can transform the TFES into a more effective tool that truly benefits all King Islanders as well as Flinders Islanders and the wider Tasmanian communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wheatons. Mr Morris.
Yes, my name is Greg Morris. I'm representing the shipping community here today as well as Chamber of Commerce and Curdo. As you know, I'm a passionate King Islander and very passionate about shipping, much to the detriment of some of the people around me there. I have been deeply involved in the challenges of shipping here for many years, and also that includes the change in different shipping companies that have gone on and the owners and operators during that time. We're here today to express frustrations that the TFES is not meeting the needs of this community, and I'll regroup again. The TFES, while initially intended to support island communities, has long failed to deliver tangible benefits to King Island. I've compiled extensive documented evidence over the years to demonstrate the extent of those failings, which I present to you as needed. But it's testament to the ongoing hardship faced by our community. There are core issues that we face. Inadequate cost recovery, reimbursement levels with the current TEF framework do not match the true cost of freight shipments confronting our community. This mismatch means that King Islanders are left to shoulder significant financial burden with little in the way of support or relief. Second is the cumbersome process. The TFES is entangled in lengthy and complex administrative procedures that hinder timely support. Businesses on King Island cannot afford such delays, which add unnecessarily stress and barriers to our economic viability. Third item is a narrow focus. The current scheme is limited in scope, excluding essential aspects such as air freight, which is critical for perishable and time-sensitive goods. Moreover, it does not allow for a wide range of goods necessary for our community to function. Today, we urgently call on the Senate to overhaul the TFES, incorporating a fairer and more balanced approach by aligning reimbursement levels with actual expenses and enhancing the scheme's scope and efficiency. We can establish a system that truly supports King Island businesses and residents. We also need a promise for continuous monitoring and adjustment to suit Bass Strait shipping costs, as these remain a significant obstacle to our island's economic health. I urge you not only to hear these requests, but to act on them. The TFES must evolve into a robust mechanism that genuinely benefits King Island, enabling our community to thrive and sustain itself for generations to come. With government recognition to take action and implement such needed improvements, TFES can transition from a source of frustration to one of empowerment and positive impact for King Islanders and all Tasmanian communities impacted by remote living freight costs. Thank you for your time, your attention and your commitment to addressing these critical issues, and we look forward to a future where the TFES serves its true purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to make a statement?
If I could read the statement on behalf of the King Island Seafoods. It's just a summary of their submission.
Thank you.
From Millie Whitehouse Summers, representing 2 King Island businesses, the Nursery and Florist at Island Sisters, as you might have visited there, and they are also King Island Seafoods in that same section. Their concerns regarding Tasmanian freight equalisation scheme are raised from the perspective of businesses heavily reliant on perishable freight, particularly those on the Bass Strait Islands. Their challenges include the remote location, the unpredictability of weather and limited transportation options, creating substantial freight challenges. These difficulties are major stresses contributing to the failure of many small businesses, which are the backbone of Australian communities. The issues they have with the current scheme is that the application process is described as onerous, nicely of course, contradictory and resource intensive, with prolonged waiting times for claim outcomes. Furthermore, eligibility issues arise when the origin of produced goods is unknown only upon receipt, impacting rebate claims. King Island Seafood processes a significant portion of the Tasmanian rock lobster total allowable catch, along with portions of Tasmanian giant crab and abalone. All are transported exclusively by air freight with no rebate eligibility, even though no alternative exists. This results in over 220 tonnes of unclaimable freight annually. We emphasise again, there is no alternative freight option. The Nursery and Florist relies heavily on air freight, lacking other viable options, leading to inapplicable rebates and inflated costs of approximately $8 per pot plant, for example. Just one of them. Recommendations from Seafoods and the Florist is that the TFES should comprehensively address the daily challenges businesses face, including unavoidable high freight rates and recognising air freight as an integral to the island's transportation highway. And improving the TFES could really give a boost to King Island businesses and help our community grow and make our island more prosperous. Thank you.
Thank you. No other opening statements? Perfect. So we'll just launch into some questions if that's okay. small business, you would be relying on food items, all sorts of things coming in regularly, efficiently and fresh. How do you struggle with that daily, as in, or weekly or monthly? How do you cope?
With the bakery, we bring everything in from Victoria. All our dry goods come from Victoria. So we have to stock 2 or 3, or probably 3 or 4 weeks in advance. I have not claimed freight equalisation since probably the 80s or 90s because it just got too difficult. So we bring in probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 tonne a month of flour, and that's without everything else that we get to make our small goods. So there's a lot, but it just got too difficult trying to claim for the bakery because I don't know where everything is sourced from. Our supplier sometimes is unsure as well. I mean, they can find out, but it just got too difficult. And for I think back then was $16 a tonne rebate. It was costing more of my time than getting the rebate, so I gave it up. And then for stock feed, we used to do it all the time for people bringing in bulk feed. That wasn't a problem back then. It was okay just for a bulk container, but when you have to do the smaller bits for everybody, it just all became too difficult. So we don't do it anymore. We will if people do ask, but it's a big thing to do.
That's probably tens of thousands of dollars that you haven't, even hundreds, maybe since the 80s, that you've not been able to access.
That's right.
Because it's too complicated.
Yeah.
Because there's a requirement, it's got to be in 6 months. Is that right? Yeah? Yeah. So basically, you're not utilising the scheme because it's not user-friendly.
No, not at all. No, it was just taking me that much time all the time, and yeah, so I just didn't do it.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly get the quantity again of flour you were bringing in?
Average a month, we would bring in about 5 to 8 tonne of dry goods a month, easy.
Yeah.
And that's just the flour and stuff. That's without all the other products.
Yeah. And on the other side of that, you've got like the feed, etc., for elders.
Yeah, we do the feed too, but they do more than us.
Yeah. So, but you're doing the freight equalisation because you've got your head around the whole complexity of it?
I'd say more...
The strange look on her face, it does not go into words.
The diplomacy. The answer would be that we feel that the benefit that the clients get back by us completing the claims make it worthwhile giving the time to do it. I don't have the time and we don't have the staff, but we do it because the dollar value of what comes back to King Island, if we're not doing it, that money isn't coming back to our community.
Which is terrible. So
and it is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're claiming back for our clients.
That's the freight component.
Yeah, the freight component.
Yeah. So if this freight equalisation scheme was put through the ATO or through an agency where all your data sits already, because you have to do quarterly BAS statements, and all you had to put in was the amount that you were reclaiming for, would that make life easier for you?
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
It would, and in an ideal world that would work, but because not all of our products are sold for primary production, that's why we haven't been able to do it as elders claiming the product, that we actually have to do it on the client's behalf.
So you do it like a collective agent where you get 2 or 3 or half a dozen people together to export in?
Oh yeah, we'd be bringing a lot of product in mixed containers.
Yeah.
And so some of that could be wheelbarrows or something, so there'd be calf pellets, and so it's really difficult to think that you could claim the
Which would be the same thing from your end of the table as well, because...
Just so many different suppliers, I think, that it's really hard to get it under one.
But we'd have a percentage of product that goes to the rural industry would be 90 plus, but we still have to do all these individual claims.
Because it's the end user.
Yeah.
What would make your life easier then? If you had a blank piece of paper, how would you like make it better?
The first thing from my perspective would be, why do we have to complete separate claims for product coming from Tasmania and product coming from Victoria?
Yep.
Freight's freight. So why am I having to complete two completely separate claims for one client?
Sounds clever.
Well, it's a
Are we talking for the same product?
No.
No. But I don't see how that makes any difference, because it's coming from a certain supplier from a certain state. Why do we need to have two forms?
So can you just give us a really quick example of
I'm
that?
just trying to get it.
Yep, so out of Tasmania, we claim polypipe and tanks, for example, which we don't claim from Victoria.
Yep.
But from Victoria, we'd be claiming posts or fencing product,
Yep.
which we're not claiming out of Tasmania. So Greg buys that product from Tassie, that product from Victoria. I have to complete two separate claims.
Right.
Why?
So they get shipped to Tasmania and then come over here?
No, the product's produced in Tasmania.
Yeah, they're produced in Victoria,
Yeah.
but it gets shipped to Tassie originally,
Yes.
and then it comes over here.
So what you're talking about is consolidating a claim, say on a monthly basis for a particular client, and it doesn't matter where the product comes from, being able to claim, so do a monthly claim, for example, for a client. So
Correct.
they might have 5 tonne of fertiliser, they might have some polypipe, they might have some fence posts and some wire, which come from a range of different places. And so regardless of where they come from, having one form, one claim, rather than a number of claims, would assist you in the administration of what you're doing for your clients as a consolidator, if you like.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is,
And so you could indicate on the form where it comes from, so that could clear up that
Well, you
requirement.
have to stipulate the place of production on the form, regardless of whether it's the Tasmanian or Victorian.
but even if it's a repeat order, you're having to duplicate that every single time, even though it's a repetitive order that you're doing, especially in your instance. What you're importing to King Island doesn't change really.
No, it's nearly the same every month.
Yeah. So for you, it would be just like tick and repeat.
Yeah.
Whereas for you, it might be different with your polypipe and your water tanks and your feed troughs and your feed. That may differ from month to month depending on what you've sold previously, whereas yours would be calculated on your regular purchases. Yeah? So what happens though, like if the ship don't come? What if the ship doesn't sail in?
We wait.
We just
Wait.
And you don't have anything to bake with?
That's why we have to keep at least, we keep about a month in stock in our shed.
Okay. So you've got the apocalypse in mind?
Yeah, because, you know, we just can't afford to fly flour in. We've had to fly some things in because the boat has missed, and we've probably missed ordering something, and, you know, there'll be maybe a couple of 20-kilo bags here and there that we've had to fly in. But, and then it's all our, we did bring in all our own veggies.
Yep.
We're bringing all our frozens in, but we stopped with Tasfast because some of the time it was $8, $9 a kilo.
Yep.
It went up, you know, from about average $3 a kilo. It just went up because if it took up more space, they would charge you for the space.
Charge your space or weight,
yeah.
whichever's the greater.
Yeah, and they wouldn't sort of come up to you with how they were working it out, like, you know, because I'd weigh it and measure it when it got there, and I said, how on earth did you get to this much? Because I work it out per kilo, not because that's what we've got to work out our costing with.
So you don't believe the algorithm is constant and the same? It's only the rate that you get from the 70s or the 80s through to today that stayed the same? But the methodology that you have to do the claim changes each time, yeah?
Okay. We've never been able to claim for air freight.
That sucks. With shipping, with the seafood, yeah? Do you actually, which way do you prefer to do it? Which way do you utilise the most, air or shipping?
There is no choice. It has to be by air. They're live lobsters. They have to be packaged in polystyrene boxes with dry ice and put on the planes, and
It's
they
fresh
had
as
to be
best.
packed
You don't want to
ready
miss
to
the
go to
seafood.
China. So
And
Or
because
wherever.
that is a premium product and you need to get it out fast, it's not like shipping out cattle.
yeah, it's all in the prior preparation, and they've got a massive team to put it all together. They have to bring in the empty poly boxes.
Yep.
So the air freight now is by volume, not by weight. So it's a massive cost just to get the boxes here, the big polystyrene that
Yeah,
you get the
which weigh nothing.
like eskies
Yeah.
here, and that's without anything. And we all pay freight on our packaging to get our goods here, whether it's by air or by ship.
And how much more do you have to pay to fly it out of here?
Depending on what costs them more, the weight or the volume.
Okay.
And the average kilo rate can be anywhere from $5 to $10 per kilo air freight.
So with the beef producers, they provided a lovely little table of the costs, or somebody had done the costs over a 12-year period, and the cost to freight it out of here went up and up and up, but the freight equalisation scheme did not, meaning that you're paying more. So do you find that flows across all your businesses?
Absolutely, and wages have gone up too to process all the paperwork to get all this done, and the return is not worth doing. People know that they need to do their sums, so it could be that the shipping companies do all the paperwork. They know exactly how much freight is coming to King Island, or the air freight, and they could process all the freight equalisation directly and pass on the savings, so we all get the benefits without doing all the paperwork.
Please, I apologise, shipping?
Right.
So you would have a fairly good grasp of how much it costs to and from, and you share the same frustration with the people to the left and right of you?
Oh yes, it's just specifically now that a lot of the goods are transshipped by Devonport.
Yep.
Definitely really exacerbated inequity between the two. Percentage back, we're getting the claim that they get back now probably only 25%, where if you're a business in probably in Tasmania getting the same rebate, they're probably getting over 50% of the freight cost reimbursed, because they can negotiate a good freight rate, which we don't have the opportunity to, and also we're locked into having to always pay the cost of the empty return, be it for fertiliser and whatever. So that is actually part of the actual shipping cost, is the cost of getting a container back, which is not claimable as an expense for a rebate.
So basically the freight equalisation scheme equalises nothing.
It's never been an equaliser.
No, it helps if it
It's
doesn't
not
equal.
equal, that is for sure. And Audrey was just saying that to get a 20-foot container, which is locally known as a reefer, from either direction, return is $7,500 per container.
Cut that in half, Heidi?
Cut it in half.
And, you know,
They don't do half containers.
No, that's what I mean. Okay.
Yeah.
That's getting it loaded on the other side, getting it shipped or transported from the wharf up here.
Yep.
And, yeah, because you've got the extra, what is it, 1,600?
So
I
all the
think
dairy
from
cheese that
Melbourne.
leaves the island, that's got to wear all that cost outgoing.
So that's
They've got to bring in the containers because they're
Is that
refrigerated.
freight to the port and from the port
No, that's
included?
That 7.5 is, yes.
delivered to your door.
Delivered to our door.
Right.
Sorry?
Yeah, that's 7.5.
Yep.
Is a total cost,
Yes.
roughly. Of,
So that's inclusive of the
yeah,
transport?
yeah.
Yeah.
Getting it loaded, taking it to the
Yep.
wharf in Melbourne,
Yep,
across to Devonport,
yep,
across to here,
yep,
to our yard.
Right.
And then we've got to unload it.
yep.
It's so complicated. Senator Urquhart, do you want to ask some questions?
I'm jumping in and out. but,
Yeah, I know. I think we all are.
just
which is
there's
nice.
well, it's a nice way to do it sometimes when there's a big group.
Oh, yep, sorry. Phil?
I just had one example. Like Greg gave me a claim that Mandy did for him back in 2021. And in 2021, we were recovering $3.60 on a lick block.
On a
We're
what,
now
sorry?
so we were recovering freight-wise
Yep.
$3.60 on a 20-kilo block.
Yep,
Is it like for the cows to lick?
Yep.
yep, cool.
And we're now recovering $6.20 on that same block.
Yep.
And that was this time 3 years ago.
So that's what you're paying freight on that component. Sorry.
Yeah. And the problem we have with these forms that Mandy fills out and all the clients get and submit is there's no transparency. Nobody knows what they've got, what they've received for what product. This claim here, there was $80 worth of freight, and Greg got back $7.74.
That's bonkers.
Now, the freight on a full container of the TFES is $840, which is then would have been 25% of the whole freight task. He hasn't even got back 10.
How do you keep in business?
Well, but why has he only got back 10% or less
So
than 10%?
is that because that is not itemised? Is that what you're saying?
No,
it's
all itemised. Oh, well, yeah, well, we
I'm
don't...
trying, sorry,
yeah, sorry,
I'm
we
just
don't
trying to
know.
get my head...
Yeah, we don't know what...
I'm trying to understand. You've quoted a figure of $7 something out of a figure. Is it because that is not itemised on what you're getting TFES back for?
See,
it's itemised.
It's okay. The Secretariat will bring it up.
Yeah. It's itemised on the way out.
But not on the way back. So that explains, so that's why you don't know what it is.
We've got no idea.
Yeah.
So basically, you've got to give all the detail, but you get nothing
that
back.
we're itemising it.
Yes.
But the client gets back one sum and they've got no idea.
No, I understand now what you're saying. That was my question, was
And that's our
is that what
frustration.
it is not itemised when it comes back, so you do not know what you're getting it for. That is, okay, I've got
That's how much the freight out of Victoria seems to have gone up just in 3 years.
And part of that is port costs and stuff like that as well, obviously.
That's a summary of what we've got there.
Great. Thanks, Greg. So if I can just go to Heidi first and maybe all three. In your submission, you've got a whole range of recommendations. Thank you. That is brilliant to have that for a Senate inquiry. You've also talked about in your submission, and I think all of you in your opening statements have talked about the air freight and the, particularly perishable goods and that not having TFES. So that's a common theme through, I think, everything that we've heard this morning and that I hear regularly. So the other issue that you've got in your submission, Heidi, is you say the unpredictable weather conditions lead to freight cancellations disrupting goods. And then you've added the impact of critical service such as the Royal Flying Doctor. Is that just an add-on in terms of the fact that you appreciate what they do but it's not linked to the freight equalisation?
I don't know if they're part of the freight equalisation, but it just gives you a bigger picture of our isolation and how critical services are. And we understand that the cost of living, and the cost of lives, and the livelihood, and the stress that all that brings as well. And we are so reliant on the flying doctors. And I think it's all relevant to the TFES because we've got to be able to afford to live here. And if we are in emergency situations and we can't get off the island due to weather, it gives you an example of we also have to live here. And I remember there's been 5 weeks over Christmas we've had no ship. There's been, I've had people stranded in my accommodation place for 3 days because we were fogged in. You could not get off the island. So it's all part of the uniqueness of living on King Island and the impact it has on our entire community. So to have the cost of living compensated on King Island makes the people that choose to live here be able to do so with that little bit more ease. There's a lot of businesses struggling at the moment with rising costs from insurance right across the board. We're grateful for the opportunity to be able to talk about getting freight costs back, because even if we've got too much in our luggage, which is our $15 allowance, it's cost...
15 kilos.
Pardon?
15 kilos.
What did I say?
Dollars.
15. $15 a kilo to pay excess. It does. It's a huge amount. So we can't even buy new clothes from the op shop and bring them back without us paying that much per kilo. It's like,
$49 for the
Yeah.
terrier to get across when we came
Yeah,
over.
no, that's great. Thank you. That's how I understood it, but I wanted you to
Yes.
put that on the record because I
And it
think
was,
that's
yeah,
really
I just wanted to just add just a, you know, we're not just criticising
Yeah, no,
everything.
no.
We've got to show some gratitude as well.
I got it, but I wanted you to put it on the record,
Yeah.
so thank
and,
you for
And
that.
I was just checking that you're going to read it, so
Yeah,
thank you.
I
You
read
did.
it and I highlighted it.
I always throw in something quirky.
So, Greg, can I just go to you? So we had the beef group and the mayor, the council earlier, and I think this is connected, but I just want to clarify with you whether this is. The real elephant in the room here is when you lost the tri-shipping service, or the triangular shipping service, I should say, and you've now got what I think has been, and I think it would be fair to say, an inadequate shipping service with the two, whatever you call them, barges or whatever that come in and out of here, that can't always handle. It was very rare for the Sea Road Mersey not to be able to pull into the port on a Sunday morning, is my understanding. But now it can happen if the weather is really, really bad, or the trip's rough. You've got a really rough trip. Does that have an effect on the general economy of King Island as well? Even when we talk about Tasmanian freight equalisation, is the shipping attached to that as well?
Oh, hugely so. Specifically not having the direct access to Melbourne, Victoria, as the retailers will have said that most of their goods actually do originate in Victoria, and it adds time and huge additional costs, having to transship. The vessels themselves, well, only this week and 2 weeks ago, they've changed the sailing dates to suit the weather specifically, and a lot of that times when that's done, it can actually mean that it adds a week to both times they moved the ship forward 2 days, which meant some stuff that was being transshipped from Victoria would have missed that vessel, so it's another week coming. So
Okay, so it didn't get to Tassie in time, which means that it can't get over here in time.
Yeah. So those sort of things, the inability to handle rough seas, definitely, but also the inability of the harbour to allow the ship to unload is also part of that. And that became apparent when the service was taken to market previously, back many years ago now. It seems to be 7 years ago, or whatever it was. That was a big impediment, the suitability of the harbour for bigger ships and its lack of shelter, where a vessel could lay over, was part of the reason it was so difficult to find a replacement service before the government took it on. Those were definitely major contributors towards that.
So just remind me, how many trips does the John Diagon and the Bass Island Line make in a week?
Generally, it's a regular service which is weekly.
So once a week?
Once a week.
Each boat comes in, whatever it's called. What is it called? Is it called a boat or a ship or a...
King Islander.
Yeah, but what do you actually call it? Is it a ship or a boat or a landing craft? Right. So once a week the landing craft comes in. It sounds like you're off to
They do like to call it differently, but that is its classification. It is classified as a landing.
So once a week they come in?
Yes. It has the capacity, and it has during the needing to move livestock and fertiliser. It was supported by the state government to do extra sailings.
Right, so it can do extra sailings.
It can do.
So given that if there's a need, it can do extra sailings, but surely that adds to the cost because you've got a smaller vessel, you're doing 2 runs when you could possibly do 1 in a bigger ship?
Look, the problem with the vessel they've got no other work for it, so it sits idle for the whole time. So it's costing probably as much sitting idle as when it's running.
So it's a very inefficient process of shipping,
the fact that
which effectively costs the island more.
And the fact that we also pay fully for the facility at Devonport where it's moored. We're paying for that facility, its construction, its maintenance, and those charges and transports are passed on to Bass Island Line, which
Yes.
is passed on to us. So yes, it is. And that facility is only being used purely for that vessel.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take the focus off the TFES and the inquiry. What I'm trying to do is encapsulate there's a whole range of issues here that actually impacts on the TFES but also on the island in terms of cost of getting goods here.
As far as supporting for King Island, the TFES can't really meet the needs.
Yep.
It can't. It's not actually. It hasn't the capacity to encourage a better shipping service.
Yep.
It needs to be other
Yes.
avenues to make shipping work for King Island.
Yep.
The TFES is purely on the outskirts of that, but it's very important that we can still get that, because
Yes.
at the moment it does help a little bit,
Yeah.
but that's the only help.
Yeah,
we
no,
get.
I understand that completely. I'm not trying to diminish that at all. I'm just trying to put it in a bigger picture so that, we take that into consideration. Thanks, Chair.
Senator Colbeck.
Thanks, Chair. Ms. Hamer, I just want to come back to you and your costs of your product coming in from the mainland and the conversation around the direction of the service, rather than being, say, from Melbourne to here, then to Devon, the Triangular or otherwise. Has that had an impact on cost?
Oh, tremendously.
Yeah. So could you quantify that for us?
We would much prefer direct sailing from Victoria, from Melbourne, to here.
So
90% of all our stuff, I'm not sure so much about Elders. I mean, they get a little bit from Tasmania, but then Eastern Line shipping comes out of Stanley. So, and out of Welshpool. But all our stuff gets loaded in Melbourne, goes across to Devonport, and then across to here. And like Greg said, if you don't have your container booked in, if you get stuck in traffic, whatever, and your container misses that sailing to Devonport, you've got to wait another week. So then your goods are sitting in Devonport for a week before it comes, and it has happened. Or Sea Road forget to take it across, which has happened as well.
and then you incur storage costs in Devonport.
Yes.
So can you quantify the difference in cost? Are you able to do that? Can you, do you have an example from the time where you were able to bring product directly from the mainland to here, and the cost of that versus
Well, it's round about
additional leg?
It was like when I started, I just jump in here, when I started working here, which was about 4 years ago, the freight price per cube was at $160, and now it's gone up to $256 per cube. So it's a big jump within 4 years, I think, and I think that's, yeah, it's where you can see the difference. Like,
what are you saying now?
$256 per cube.
And we possibly have to reassess that as well.
Because we just had another increase through Bass Island Line increase as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the difference between the direct route versus the train shipment.
It's round about, I'd say off the top of my head, with all your extra port fees, all that sort of thing, wharfage, it'd be close to $2,000, if not more.
So what are you paying for a container to get here?
It's about, to get it loaded, and with the actual container costs, we've got prices printed out here. That's the one, oh, you'll be able to see, one's return and one's in. That's just the shipping and the wharfage, those bills.
I think his question
Can I ask now,
if it
while
came
we're talking
direct
about
from
forms, do you
Victoria.
have for us to table those as evidence?
Yeah, look, there's a couple with it as well.
Yeah.
Another page. Sorry.
And also the one from Elders, are you happy if we?
That's for Greg anyway, that's basically Greg's.
Okay.
You still pay that. Yeah, that's what he needed to hear.
Oh, no, if it came direct from Melbourne to here, it'd cost you about $2,000 less. Yeah, that's what it used to.
About 2,000 less if it came from Victoria to here.
Per container.
Probably could,
Per container.
could chase up the actual numbers.
It's actually in
If
our
someone-
submission, in the beef group submission on the
Yes.
back.
Yeah.
20-foot sea container from Melbourne to Devonport's 1,300.
Yeah.
And a 20-foot sea container, Devonport to Grassy's 3,850.
And it doesn't matter what that product is.
That's the cost of the box. Yep.
But that doesn't include the leg to Victoria, but alternatively paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you put the two together, that's how much it costs to get here. So that's, the 1,300 plus the 3,840.
Well,
So it's about $2.5 grand.
But even the hire cars that you're driving in, to bring them to King Island costs $1,000 in freight.
Yeah.
And how much do you get back?
I don't know. Does anyone apply for a rebate on cars?
Because there's the other one, the vehicle one, yeah?
It's got to go back out. It's got to.
No,
gotta be
but
a-
say I buy a car and I ship it over. It costs me $1,000 to
It
bring it
wouldn't
here.
qualify.
If you buy a recreational boat or if you
Because
buy
we don't know how long it's been in the country.
anything to construct or to live life on King Island, it all has to be shipped in. So if you need a crane or this or that, there's freight on everything. Yep. Just to give you an idea. Yeah, it's huge. And no general container. Say we bring over a pallet of flour.
Yeah.
There is no general container to bring over a pallet of frozen vegetables. We can't bring over anything that's refrigerated or frozen unless you fill up a 20-foot container.
Correct.
And many of us don't have storage capacity to be 5 weeks in advance or any of that. So there's no general freight availability for non-perishables or frozen items at all, other than 20-foot container.
Can I just very quickly ask Greg, this letter you've given us from the Services Australia, who manage the fund, you've received assistance of $7.74. There is a claim number and an invoice number.
Which relates to those. That's a claim that you've
That's
got
the
there.
previous one that we've got the invoice for, so we know the amount of what the cost was and then what you got back. Is that right?
That's correct. That's how much work had to go in to get $7, and then they queried one item, which is worth 80 cents. We had to do a query on to find more evidence.
You'll see it on the asset.
So it was a mixed container of product.
Yeah.
So they are individual items that we purchased through Elders.
There's not many
So-
containers that come in with all the same goods. They're all
No, it would
general
be,
freight.
it would be large bulk items, say a container of fertiliser or something like that, but the rest of it is largely mixed, and so you have to make a claim for the items in the container that qualify versus those that don't. Is that?
Yeah.
I'll just make a point on that claim. So previously, or say 10 years ago, we would accumulate the invoices for the client over a certain period when we had 2 years to submit the claim. Now that that time frame's been reduced to 6 months, you will find that there is a small claim like that, or in fact that the client doesn't even get to claim at all because there's insufficient goods, in that now we do it every 4 months. However, if it were over that 12-month period, then it could have accumulated into hundreds of dollars.
To something worthwhile.
Yeah, so no one actually justified to us why the time frame was changed to 6-month maximum to claim the product.
How far back can they audit you?
7 years it was.
Yeah,
Statute. Okay, just checking.
but yeah, I guess our question is, who made that decision?
Yeah.
Why was it made? And is there a foundation for it? Because basically we feel like it's depriving the clients of being able to complete a claim over an extended period. Okay. Would the primary producers agree with that?
I have a recollection, having been around this buoy a couple of times previously, that it might have been a recommendation from a previous inquiry. But I think it's useful for us to hear what the impact of that process has been.
It was 2016
Yeah.
when that was changed,
Yeah.
from 2 years to 6 months.
I thought I'd heard it before.
Under your watch, Richard, what happened?
Oh, no,
I don't know.
None of that, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, no, that's...
Well, again, I think it was a result of a recommendation from a previous inquiry,
Yeah.
but
Ideally, would you
as I
like
said,
that
I think
reverted?
it's useful to have a longer time frame in circumstances where there are a lot of smaller items that.
Well, particularly this year with the drought, like the extreme amount of extra product that we were bringing to the island because of the drought conditions put undue pressure on us to be able to complete the claims for the clients because of the magnitude of product that came in and the fact that if I didn't have those claims out to them by the end of June, they weren't going to qualify for that rebate.
So within the provisions of the scheme, are there circumstances where you can claim for an extension of time to make a claim? Okay, that's a good point for us.
Not that we've been made aware of.
There is an extension of time option.
Yeah, you have to write a letter and then they look at it, and then if you are lucky enough, they'll, yes.
So it's by
applied
request.
for given the drought, but at the time we just thought we've got to get these claims done because it's just so much money to come back that we made it happen.
How many people work in your business?
We budgeted for 5.5 and at the moment we have 3.
And how much time does it take for you to do these claims?
At least a week at home uninterrupted every 3 months.
So you're the 0.5 that you can't afford to not have on the floor.
We get by.
We get by. As I said, we just make it work because it's too much money not to be coming back to the island. But yes, it could be simplified, it could be streamlined, it could be a lot more user-friendly, and there needs to be a way that we can claim as a business, not having to fill in 150 claims.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's our end goal, and I think the primary producers definitely get that.
Because you want business and people on the island.
Yes.
I will flag that we're going to shut for lunch at 1.
Can I just very quickly... Oh, sorry, Greg, do you want to make a comment?
Just the small claims that we're doing, like calf milk powder and lick blocks, the supplier should be able to claim the full pallet that comes in, not have to differentiate between every customer. They should be able to do that and pass on the savings in the one claim, and that's where the problem seems to be. The end user has to claim, the actual retailer can't claim on behalf of the end user, even though it's purely for animal welfare, and there's no potential that it's going to be fraudulently used elsewhere, because unless people are going to start making calf milk themselves because they're running that short of milk, I don't know.
Greg, can I just very quickly ask you, you said that extra sailings could occur if necessary. What triggers that decision?
It took a drought, basically.
Sorry?
It took a drought.
Okay, right.
Yeah, but we all understand that it has to operate as cheaply as possible to try and maintain, to try and reduce the amount of money it's losing.
Yeah.
But what else can I say?
Yeah.
It also takes about 12 hours to steam across. Greg, would you verify that? You were on the ship not that long ago?
Because it's so weather dependent, it has to allow 12 hours sailing, because that's the way it is.
Yes.
It's to save fuel as well, of course.
Yeah, because if they speed up, it uses
more fuel.
Just my other question, I'm not sure whether you've provided that. You, in your opening statement, you said the TFES is not meeting the needs of the community, and you had evidence. Is that what you've provided, or are you able to provide us with some additional stuff around that?
The evidence, I guess, is once again the comparison. You probably found it with the livestock as well. What we actually can claim back compared to mainland Tasmania, where the big companies there can negotiate a very good shipping rate across Bass Strait, and what they get back may be 50 or up to 60% of what it's actually costing them in freight. So per tonne, they're quite a reasonable comparative to road transport. Our end cost, because it's got to include the empty return container, plus all the transmodal cost at Devonport. We've got a $140 fee if you go one side of a river and back every container, and those sort of things. Basically, if we get back between 18 and 25% of what we pay, so We're paying probably freight-wise, probably 6 times the amount of freight that the Tasmania customer's paying, and only getting the same amount back. So it's that far off the mark. It's almost becoming irrelevant in it.
Yeah, no, that's really useful. The empty container stuff is great because I didn't remember reading that in any submissions. So it's really good to have that on the record as well now. So, thanks.
A couple of questions.
Yeah, just a couple more. In respect of the intermodal costs, do you have any data on their movement? We have spoken to previous witnesses about, so I'm talking about port costs. Is there any information?
Fair few on that invoice showing there. You've seen that copy of that invoice in the Devonport one?
Yeah.
I'm looking for movement over time, though. Do you have any data on that?
Oh, sorry.
Multiple invoices that would show
movement over time. So
movement over time. Sorry, yeah.
We're talking about the gap and the increase in the gap. That's been one of the features of the conversation.
I have got a chart of the comparisons that Basson and I did when they first closed the Victorian leg, changed from triangle to Tassie only. They put out a price structure. The difference, the Tassie price was reduced, but a lot of these intermodal components have only snuck in recently since. You know, that wharf side, when they found out they're losing too much money to cover the cost of taking it from one wharf to the other, they crept on as well. But
so do you have any data on when those costs were introduced? I mean, they are additional costs.
Are you asking us to get it and present it to you from Basel Online?
Yes, please. Yeah. Well, you would have it on your invoices, would you not? The introduction of these additional costs?
yes, I think stockfeeds would have a good records as well and what they've found once it moved.
I'd be curious to understand when they started to appear. And the other question, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of the submissions have talked about indexing the TFES to CPI. My question is, do you have any information that tracks CPI against shipping costs? What would have? My sense would be that shipping costs have gone up at a higher rate than CPI, and so if your recommendation to us is to increase TFES with CPI, you're effectively still going backwards.
I believe there is actually marine CPI. I have seen it somewhere. It was a long time ago, but there actually was a CPI.
But a marine CPI is different to CPI.
Yeah.
And your entreaty to us, as a part of this whole process, is to ensure that costs are covered, or differential in costs are covered, which goes back to the concept of TFES. And if we're to increase the rebate at CPI and shipping costs are going at, CPI is 5 and shipping costs have gone at 10, which is a number I saw last year for
I totally agree. I think the CPI would suit mainland Tasmania because their freight component of their cost of living is a set amount, where ours is so much higher. The CPI won't touch the sides, basically.
So if we're looking at what we're looking at is a recommendation that there be a regular review of costs to assess what the equalisation rate should be rather than CPI. You would prefer to see that than CPI.
Because costs are going up higher than CPI.
Well, if Tasports, for example, are introducing new costs, that's not CPI, that's additional cost.
Yeah.
So how do you assess those if it's a CPI process, is my question, which is effectively also a statement. But I just wanted to clarify the CPI versus actual additional cost, which is probably where the whole thing sits in a bigger sense anyway.
Do you have any further questions?
I'll take your nod as a yes, Mr. Morris, so, just for Hansard, that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, look, I guess CPI is what's probably been missing in the last several years. It definitely hasn't been
Well, it's been nothing. If the evidence shows that it's been nothing, but if we're going to fix it, what's the best fix? The submissions largely say CPI, and my question, my instinct is that that's not correct. It's rather to be a regular assessment of cost, and then weighted against the actual differential, which is the point.
And I bear the brunt of that because I did say CPI as a starting point, but I've also said to establish an annual review cycle to adjust costs based on the current economic data.
Very happy to take that as evidence. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I did note that.
I've written both, like as a recommendation to consider both. So
Okay.
my apologies, everybody, but CPI at a minimum because we haven't had a rise since 1988, as you say, and CPI at a minimum. Bass Island Line have charged 20% increase since January, just to give you an idea.
100%.
And that was at the round table with the farmers. Do you remember that? Yep.
And
they were sitting at the table and said yes, and it's going to go up again.
And look, as I said, I think one of the shipping companies across Bass Strait was 10% last year.
Yes.
And would have gone again this year, but I haven't just haven't seen the number.
And it's continual. And then you have the government price of Bass Island Line versus staying on par with the private enterprise for the likes of Eastern Line Shipping. So, you know, we've got to take that into consideration as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Are those costs equitable for the freight on both of those services?
They're supposed to be.
Are they? They are.
Government regulation is supposed to be on par with private enterprise charges.
Okay.
You said supposed
And if you want to
be.
verify that, ask Eastern Line Shipping, sorry.
You said supposed to be.
That's why I'm asking,
Yeah.
is it or is it
Yeah,
not?
I don't want to publicly say.
Greg, do you know?
I think it would need to be researched and
Okay.
Documented officially.
Right, okay.
But
Which is what the beef group
I'm offering you an
asked us
idea,
for.
a suggestion to investigate.
Yeah, no worries, okay. We'll see if we can get some information on that.
Does anybody have anything else they would like to say before we finish for lunch?
Only the King Island and Flinders the same, never had access to bulk fuel and access to international shipping that could deliver bulk fuel like Tasmania.
Yep.
So it was never part of a scheme, obviously, because Tasmania had access to international ships coming in with bulk fuel, so it was never needed. But it's been a huge impost to the island, the fuel cost, because once again it's in containers. We've got to pay for the empty container to go back, which is quite high with fuel because there are extra penalties on fuel containers, you know, empty or full. So we feel that, well, I think the island feels that ideally would like to get bulk fuel to come in with a vessel, but in the interim, we feel that bulk fuel should be part of the TFES for the islands. And
Do you have storage for bulk fuel?
sorry?
Is there storage capacity for bulk fuel?
Is there currently?
Yeah.
No, it goes in the hull of the ship, and these are barges flat-bottomed.
No.
What about when it gets to the island though, Greg?
In containers, basically.
Yes.
Containers.
So it's a
Oh,
portable
right.
fuel
Yeah.
station, basically.
Yeah, no, got you. Yeah.
Stored by Tasports.
Oh, hello.
Yep, okay. Thank you.
Look, thank you for your evidence today, ladies and gentlemen. The committee has set Friday the 25th of 2024 as the due date for answers to questions on notice or any additional information that were requested. And we thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days. Thank you.
Thank you. I should have just grabbed this.
So I now welcome representatives of Phoenix Community House and Sharp Airlines. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you both. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today, starting from left to right? That's okay.
Yep, Alistair Dord, CEO of Sharp Airlines.
Sally Hanavier, Manager of Phoenix Community House.
Do either of you have a short statement that you'd like to read out?
I would. So nice to meet you, Mr. Tyrrell, and members of the Select Committee. Thanks for asking me to speak today. My name is Sally Hanavier. I'm the manager of Phoenix Community House. I was born and bred here. I left for 15 years, travelled around Australia, travelled around the world and came back. So this is my island home and I'm very passionate about it. As a man,
Song out of that, Sally. My island home.
my island home.
I'll do the chorus, not the
Being a manager of Phoenix House, I see people coming up every day talking about the cost of living and how they're going to stay here. We help them as much as we can. We try and give them free food, we give them vouchers, or we point them in the right direction as far as service providers go. It's really not affordable at this present time. The cost of living on King Island has always been high, but it's actually terrible at the moment. And where we're seeing the impact, we're not seeing it with the tourists and the golf, we're seeing it for the people on the ground. Airfares alone, and
We love you, Alistair.
yeah, sorry. If an average family of mum and dad and 2 kids were to go to the nearest port, which is Burnie, it costs them $2,000, approximately, a little bit more. Fuel, we pay 76 cents a litre more than our mainland Tasmania. We pay 30% more in building materials. To build a house here, it costs us double. There's no public transport. There's no road or rail. Perishables are a worry because a lot of it have got to be air freighted in. And I can give you an example of that later if you want, to save time for what happened with us at Phoenix House. It's my understanding that the TFES is worked out based on transporting goods by road over an equivalent distance of 300 kilometres from Devonport. Since the Bass Strait Islands were introduced into this scheme, now all the containers have got to be transshipped through Devonport. And that means an added cost of $3,000 per 20-foot container, which is passed on to the King Island consumer. As the beef producers said in their submission number 17, Bass Strait is a national highway for Tasmania. The current TFES component acknowledges this, but does not acknowledge it is also our national highway to King Island. King Island is part of Tasmania, and I think some people forget that, and it's the closest point of contact to mainland Australia, and yet we pay double the price in freight. I can provide other examples, and later on you can ask me whatever you like, but I've got 4 suggestions perhaps I could put to the Select Committee. Would you like me to say them now? Mm-hmm. 1, that the Tasmanian Freight Equalisation Scheme be indexed to keep up with CPI and the cost of living and be reviewed annually. 2, that the TFES look at covering freight by air as well as freight by sea. 3, that the TFES consider the high cost of transshipping containers, Melbourne, Devonport, King Island and reverse, and amend the scheme to assist with the extra cost. And 4, that the scheme needs to be extended to all goods shipped to the Bass Strait Island, not just manufacturing, mining, agriculture, forestry or fishing, with the possibility of the King Island dairies closing next year. That will further deplete our industry, and if this is not considered, families will continue to leave, our services will be reduced, our school intake will decrease, businesses will close, and only the rich will be able to afford to live here. Thank you.
Sally, sorry, Ms. Hanavier.
No, Sally.
Do you have a statement, Alistair, because you did table?
No, it's just some information.
Yep.
I guess, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of the committee. I do apologise that I didn't provide a submission prior to today. My discussions with the Mayor were only fairly recent around their ambitions to expand the equalisation scheme to incorporate air transport, and we're certainly happy to support that, and that's why I'm here, I guess, to really provide the committee with context around Sharp Airlines freight and passenger operations, to give you some, I guess, idea around volumes that we transport via air and our capacity numbers as well. As I said, we're here to support the community and the council with their their endeavours to get it expanded to incorporate air transport.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Question, Ms. Sally. Are there any items that you use at Phoenix House, Community House that are from Ireland, or is everything from off Ireland?
Because we're a not-for-profit, we don't actually, we've got a community garden and we've got the men's shed, but we grow produce in the garden that we give free to the community or for a little donation. So everything's got to be imported. And probably an example of that, we're part of the Neighbourhood House Network of Tasmania. There's 35 houses. Loaves and Fishes is a charity that services all of these houses. Loaves and Fishes tried to support us as well. We just got caught. We tried to bring the produce in, the perishable produce in by boat. The boat ended up going to Melbourne, came in a week later, it was just all completely rotten. They offered us bread and milk, and this is no to you at all. And the only thing I've found since then is perhaps if we were to get an account with Sharp Airlines, it is cheaper per kilogram. Is that true?
Yep.
Right, well, we have never been told that. So we were bringing in 5 crates of fresh milk because you can't get fresh milk, and we were taking it to the creche, and we were supplying it to families to see that they've got fresh milk.
You have to pay the transport costs on that, though, don't you, from Loaves and Fishes?
Yeah, we were. It was coming out of our pocket. So we were getting these 5 crates over of free milk, of 2 litre of milk, and we had to pay $500 freight to get them here.
Yep.
So if you're working out at $6.70 a kilo, a $3 bottle of milk, add $13 onto that, and we could only do it for a few weeks, and we said no.
You mentioned the children. How many children are you supporting here on the island?
A lot. Most of the there's 240, I think, at the school, and I think there's getting less and less. I think they lost a whole heap at the end of last term. Our next thing, we've just organised some fresh fruit and veggies through Young's Veggie Shed in Camdale. We're having them because we didn't have any luck with Sharp. We are now going through Eastern Shipping. We're still going to have to pay the freight on that, but they're working in well with us. It'll arrive on Wednesday. I've already been up to the childcare centre today, and I'll go back up there again, so I don't know how many. I think they're at full capacity up there, so we'd be touching every family. And we're going to go and put, like as you do the normal in Coles and Woolies away, we're going to put a basket at the cafe at the school so that the kids can just go and get an apple and an orange or whatever.
I was also out at the art gallery / old school, and one of the ladies there was telling me about a lunch program that they do at the school.
Yeah.
I know that some schools have the luxury of not having to charge for it, but I think she said that here it's $4 a day.
Yeah.
Do you help subsidise that?
No. And the previous owner of Foodworks used to do the breakfast club, but when they left, it never really got taken up. We have had people over from, I think it's healthy eating at schools or something, some sort of program, and there was 30 schools that have been...
Through Loaves and Fishes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and now they're looking at another 30, and we were pushing and pushing for that to go in.
So I've given the lady my contact details so I can help her out to connect.
Yeah.
So with the daycare centre, so there's a lot of little people up there that you're trying to help educate and maintain in the community.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you do for them?
Lots. So we used to take all the milk up. We'd go and buy bread for them. Today I took up apples, oranges, mandarins, little snack carrots. They needed little trucks for their sand pit, so we went out and bought them. We've got a really good, healthy relationship with them as well. So if they know of any family in need, they can just ring us, and we can just know where to put them as far as getting them some clothing and make sure that the family gets some food.
So you wouldn't have a lot of interaction with the Freight Equalisation scheme except for getting your donated goods across.
Yep.
But you're helping the community to stay here and maintain here.
Yeah. Cool. And I understood, when I rang Nikita during the week and I said, is it appropriate for me to come to this? And Nikita was saying, well, yes, it probably is, because you're giving an overall view of the state of what is happening on the island. Yeah. And if things don't change, there's going to be less and less people here, which is going to be more cost to the federal government and the state government. So even though we're not officially as an organisation affected by the freight equalisation scheme, those around us are.
Can I just ask, just on that fruit that you get from Young's Veggie Shed,
Yep.
so you pay the freight.
Yep.
Is that an eligible goods that you can claim or could claim?
Well, I would think so, because when you read the guidelines, it's supply of, isn't it, from Tasmania, and a lot of their produce is from
But you don't do that?
Well, if we were given the opportunity, we would, yes.
It's a question mark, and I'd need to read it a little bit more, because basically it's the end user. So that's a question mark around whether you're the end user or whether the kids who are eating it is the end user. And I cannot imagine a preschooler applying for the TFES. So it's a question that
could be a High Court decision.
I think that I'll follow up and see whether or not that is, because it may be that you could recoup.
True.
Yeah, and basically the amount that we're spending on freight is just taking them away from the service that we're doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't make any profit, we don't want to do anything like that. So basically, the more that's gobbled up with freight, whatever, it means the less the produce that we can supply.
Yeah.
When it
So,
runs out,
Mr
it runs out.
Dorwood, Sally made a point about if they have an account with you guys, it's cheaper.
Yep.
I don't know what the costs are, but would it be cheaper to do that than, I mean, I don't know how many apples, it's a crate or something, I suppose.
We bought in 5 boxes.
5 boxes, so just like the normal
From
apple
Mons.
boxes?
No, from the north.
From Burnie, okay.
Yeah.
Would that be cheaper than through the shipping, do you think?
Well, it goes per kilo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're about
that's the
25
thing.
kilo, aren't they?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering what the comparison would be.
Well, I've only found out in the last week that it is a cheaper rate through
Yeah.
Sharp if you
Yeah.
have an account.
If your account is a regular shipper, yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah, okay.
after this, if we
Yeah.
sit down, we'll get you set up and I'll
Yeah.
work out,
That
make sure
would
that we
help.
give you a rate that's comparable with what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good. See, Sally, the use of you coming along today has been beneficial already. Not only to us, but to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
No,
to
no,
the
if
community.
if it's a not-for-profit community
Absolutely. Yeah.
project, absolutely. Just
Yeah.
we'll sit down and chat
Good.
once we're done.
That's great.
So in that, how does TFAS impact Sharp Airways, Mr Dorwood?
Well, I guess at the moment it is only a sea freight program, correct? And so the endeavours to get it expanded to incorporate air freight. I mean, a subsidy for shippers at the end users end would obviously stimulate more freight transport, so it benefits operators like ourselves as well. We currently between the two islands, between King Island and Flinders Island, we carry about 455,000 kilos of freight a year. King Island's 360,000 of that. 200 odd out of Melbourne and about 150 out of Launceston. So we have quite a lot of freight activity, but most of it is onto the island, not off the island. We don't do a lot of off-island freight, to be honest.
So you bring it in, but not
We bring
take
it
it
on.
out.
Yeah, we bring
You're
it
the
in.
lifeline to the island then?
Yeah, more so than an export function. We're more than happy to look at how we can expand that to help with freight off the island as well. But yeah, the vast majority is onto the island. We provide freight service for one of the supermarkets here, the supermarket on Flinders Island as well.
Yeah.
We provide freight for the hospitals. We take pathology off the island. King Island motorcycles just across the road. They're about 10,000 kilos a year in tyres and components to get cars serviced, etc., etc.
So
as
more
well. So,
stuff would be what you bring to the island than visitors?
pardon, sorry.
Resources that the island needs to function, like the motorcycle shop, groceries, milk, bread, all that. You bring more value to the community with what you bring in rather than the visitors?
I guess the island needs both of it for its lifeblood, doesn't it? It needs the tourism. So passenger numbers are about 45,000 a year to both islands.
What are they for King Island?
For King Island specifically, so Launceston / Burnie to King Island's just over 15,000, and Melbourne to King Island's about 8,500.
And a lot of that would be for medical treatment or family.
Certainly, the King Island to Launceston under the PTAS scheme, that's probably about 25% of our passenger loads approximately would be PTAS subsidised.
And the Melbourne would be purely visitors or tourists?
Largely visitors and tourists. It's hard for us because we don't know who's a local and who's not, except if they're PTAS, they're obviously a Tasmanian.
Yes.
But yeah, certainly this time of year there's a lot of golf activity, etc. But there's also a lot of people from the island that go to Melbourne for, you know, when it's spring racing, when it's football, whatever it may be as well. So, because we're only 35 minutes to Essendon from here, so rather than going via Burnie to get to Launceston. So.
I was talking to someone before about their children. They have to go off island and board to do their education. There's no subsidy that the state government provides for that?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator. No.
You get 9 free airfares a year.
There you go.
Well, you used to, yeah. I don't know how it is now, but when my children...
I think it's changed. The gentleman I was speaking with, his children were meant to go back to school and they couldn't get off island due to weather. And the only other time it was $900 and something or $600 and something to get both of his children.
That'd be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be right. Yeah. But if it's scheduled, I mean, going back a few years now, both of my children had to fly off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if it was Commonwealth funded or whether it was state funded. I think it was Commonwealth, actually.
There's very few subsidised airlines nationally now. Some in Queensland, some of the regional routes and some in Western Australia, I think, but mostly it's all commercial.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Yeah.
Rex?
At the moment.
Yeah, Rex have some subsidised routes in Queensland.
Yeah.
Sorry, I digressed there. Apologies.
Can I just ask, in terms of some of the freight operations, you've highlighted what you've got here.
Yep.
You charge per weight, not capacity, not size.
Yeah, it's a per kilo charge.
Yeah, okay. So for, you know, heavier things, obviously. Where you've got government departments, local council, police, emergency service, what sort of things are we talking about there?
Tas Water, we've brought equipment over for testing things and bits and pieces.
Yep.
I had a look at the kilo usage for the last financial year, and Tasmanian Police was about 300 kilos for the year or something.
Yeah, right.
Like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixture, and then council as well. We bring stuff in for the council.
And predominantly, where does most of that come from? Obviously, the mainland of Tasmania rather than Victoria.
Yeah, I guess if you remove, because a lot of the IGA freight comes from Victoria with us.
Yep.
So yeah, the vast majority of our freight, if you took the IGA out of the equation, comes from Launceston or Burnie.
Yep.
Yep.
And do you have times of the year that the demand is greater?
Well, certainly from a grocery perspective, the demand goes up as the tourist season goes up.
Yep.
So we've
around
just
Christmas and
so we've just moved into our summer schedule now, and passenger numbers are going up. So there's obviously more demand on local cafes, the pub, the supermarket, etc. So we have a contract out of Burnie with PFD Foods, for example, and they provide a lot of the food to the local restaurants and cafes here.
Yep.
So I'll use them as an example. In winter, we would probably get down to about 300 kilos a week with PFD. We deliver on a Thursday. The summer period, it goes up to about 1,000 kilos a week for PFD Foods.
And do you put additional flights on for that, or is that just more capacity of how many passengers you can actually bring
I guess the one of the advantages with the Metroliner aircraft that we operate is that you can change the seating configuration to allow for more freight in the back.
Yep.
So on a Thursday, for example, out of Launceston for the whole summer, we have the aircraft configured in 15 seats, so we can make sure we can get the PFD in the back.
Yeah. And you normally have, is it 19?
19,
yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
I've been in that 19th seat before in the middle of the back row.
Yeah, but you're a pocket rocker.
yeah, not the best seat, Senator.
It's pretty good, actually. You've got plenty of leg room, but
We haven't got that problem.
we don't need that, do we, Sally?
Alistair, is it fair to say that shipping constitutes a competitor to Sharp Airlines freight business?
Sea shipping?
Yeah.
No. Okay. No, I'd say the vast majority of the sea freight's large, bulky things. I guess has come through in the inquiry. The perishable side of things and stuff needs to go by air. We do carry a fair bit for toll and road runners and couriers out of Launceston in, and they can be, household goods and things like that. I wouldn't see sea freight would be a big competitor to us, going on the evidence that's been tabled today as to what their challenges are from a sea freight perspective.
And mail, Aussie Post, we
don't do the mail.
You don't do that? That's done by Alliance or something?
No, that would be done by Southern Airlines / Vortex.
Okay.
We did the mail up until July last year.
Right. So that's a competitive tender process, is it? Yep.
Yep.
Senator Colbeck, do you want to jump in?
I was just going to do some stuff on the freight, which you've largely done. There's no designated freight flights. It's all done as part of the passenger service.
It's largely all done as part of the passenger service, Senator Colbeck. We have in the past and still do occasionally, if we get a backlog of supermarket freight, we'll bring an aircraft in freight configuration and run a one-off service to bring it down. But generally we try and get it into the back of the regular passenger transport. So we've moved to 9 services a week between Essendon and King, and then we're basically double daily out of Launceston via Burnie to here as well during the summer period. So we find that with capping of seats on a few flights a week to allow for extra uplift, we can generally get everything here that we need to. Of course, if we could expand our freight network, then, there might be opportunities to do that, to run a freighter down here. Backload is the problem with that, though. We need to get backload off the island.
That was going to be my question. If the predominant volume of freight is to the island, going back the other way.
Yeah, largely if we put on an extra flight to bring freight down and it has passenger seats on it, we'll do a last-minute sale or maybe pick up 1 or 2 people who are watching airfares. But generally, we'll fly back an empty aeroplane.
Really?
Which is
wow. Okay.
We don't like to, we don't set out to do that, but sometimes if there's been a backlog and the stuff has to get here, that's what we'll do. We'll put it on and we'll run an empty one back. But ideally, we would build up a network of off-island freight to help, I guess, ease the load on the way back.
Your passenger load, and you're doing how many flights a day out of Victoria?
So to King Island, 9 a week. So there's
9 a week.
a double on a Monday, double on a Friday, and then daily on the other.
So are you seeing growth in that market? So you're talking about 45,000 passengers a year across your network, Flinders and King, and about 22 of that, 23 of that. Yeah, 23 of that to King Island. Is that growing? Is that developing?
No, historically it's been roughly at the same level. Normalised for COVID, it's been roughly at the same level. It doesn't grow substantially. I know there are some developments on the island that they're hoping to bring in a lot more golfers, etc., and they're providing accommodation at the ocean dunes, and that's their plans to build, which will be interesting to see where the number of golfers get to during the golf season. But largely our passenger numbers, maybe a couple of % increase a year, not a huge amount.
That's exactly what was in the back of my mind, and I was just sort of wondering who's filling the market.
Well, I think the same probably applies to both airlines. Is one of the limitations on expanding the market is beds and places for people to rent and stay. There's more going on to Airbnb, but as we've heard, there's a shortage of rental properties here as well. So that's a big limitation in growing the market. I don't know what Rex's numbers are for on and off the island, but they operate a bigger aircraft than us, and the times they run double dailies as well. We'll find out how well that goes for them in the future, I guess, as well.
You have mentioned to me before that your fleet are ageing. So that's going to,
Like
aren't we all? Aren't we all? I know, right? But, some of us grow better with age than, maybe not me. But what's the plan moving forward? Because you will have to renew your fleet and you will have to get different planes.
Yep.
Because you've mentioned to me that the current plane that you fly, they're not making it anymore.
Yeah, I guess we're in an interesting sector of the industry with the size of aircraft that we operate. The aerospace industry really stopped building pressurised 19-seat aeroplanes when they built the Metro or the Beech 1900. Now, the average life of our fleet, if you look at it in terms of cycles or hours, we're just at over half-life for the Metro. So the average age of the fleet from an hours and cycles perspective is at about 50%. Some aircraft are getting towards the end of their life cycle. We've just recently purchased 2 aircraft from New Zealand. One's already flying with us, the other one I'm waiting to hear from Ops today whether or not the CASA process to bring that into operation is completed today. So that brings the fleet up to 18. Spare parts, human resources, they're all the challenges in regional aviation. And all regional operators are largely in a similar boat, Senator Tyrrell, as we chatted a couple of weeks ago in Launceston, that the regional aviation industry in Australia is operating aircraft that have a finite life on them. Spare parts are really quite challenging to obtain, so that leads to delays in maintenance, which leads to delays in it can affect your reliability and your on-time performance because aircraft are taking longer to get through maintenance. So it's all part of the challenge. There is a 19-seat aircraft that's been built by Cessna, but it's a non-pressurised aeroplane at the moment, and you can't have non-pressurised aeroplanes going across Bass Strait. So
Yeah, I'm not coming.
neither am I. So that's one of the big challenges that we face as a business, as we look at how we can continue to grow the business and manage the fleet at the same time, and what's the next aircraft for us.
Broadening the scope of TFS so that you could more efficiently bring items in and out, would that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think with the expansion of the scheme, from an airline operations perspective, I know the Mayor talked about an automated system, and we've talked about the end user, etc., etc. Airlines like ourselves, that we do run on very thin margins, and we have the winter doldrums like other businesses associated with the islands. We all have the winter doldrums, and our cash flow through summer gets us through the next winter. So from an airline perspective, we wouldn't, if there was the mechanism of the airline reducing their fees to then get a rebate down the track would be probably challenging from a cash flow perspective for us, rather than the end user of the freight service or the passenger ticket or whatever it may be actually getting a subsidy back.
But if it was incorporated at the front end when purchasing the ticket for the freight or whatever, would you be willing to do the administration to recoup the cost?
Depends how onerous it would be, Senator Tyrrell, but yeah, I mean, whatever the scheme's best for the community, as an operator, we would obviously we would adapt and we would run with it. Because at the end of the day, it's what we're talking about is a benefit to the community that completely relies on operators like ourselves or sea transport to get everything on and off the island. So,
are there other areas that Sharp operate in where there's a similar situation to King and Flinders?
No.
So this is quite unique?
Yeah, so our operation is pretty evenly divided into 3 sectors. So we do fly-in, fly-out mining charter work, largely in South Australia.
Right.
We provide freight services throughout Queensland on behalf of Team Global Express, or Toll. We currently operate for Toll between Hobart, Launceston and Melbourne, but that ceases this Friday because Toll have seen a drop in volume to the point, and an increase in operating costs, that we've all seen, where they'll just consolidate and take it on a larger aeroplane out of Launceston now, instead of using a Metro every night, which we used to do. And then we have the Bass Strait RPT, regular public transport network that we, Launceston, Burnie, King and Launceston Flinders, and then Essendon to both islands.
Yep. So. I'm just, the reason I asked that question, because I know how governments shy away from additional costs of supporting things. But yeah, I'm just trying to sort of ascertain that if there was particular exceptions made for TFES on air freight, perishables, into King and Flinders. I'm trying to think of other islands around Australia that would then jump on the bandwagon to try and get the same. I'm thinking Norfolk.
All the Torres Strait Islands, Kangaroo Island.
Yeah, yeah.
But
so-
there was data though from a few years back saying that the TFAS was underutilised and that it wasn't actually utilising all the funds that were allocated to it.
No, I understand that, but TFES doesn't come into play in any of those other islands, obviously, because it's the Tasmanian freight equalisation. But it's just, I'm just trying to think. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud, really. But Sharp's not involved in those, so I think it's Qantas Link flies to Norfolk and other places. So yeah,
I think you might find that's the case.
thanks.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
I don't think I've got any more questions. Is there anything else you'd want to add, Sally or Alistair?
Look, yeah, I'm worried about the community. I just such a negativity out there at the moment. I hope it passes. And if we get some relief in some way to make it easier to live here and make airfares and freight more affordable, well, I'm sure we're quite a resilient lot. I'm sure we'll survive. I'll give you one example. Poor old Alistair, you shouldn't have sat next to me.
There's a bit of distance between you.
Yeah,
All good, Sally.
No, that's right. You'll find that the people, the long-term people that live on King Island, they make advantage of when they go away.
Yeah.
So I had to go, actually went to the neighbourhood house conference. Yeah, so I went away, did that, and you normally go a couple of days beforehand at your own expense, of course, and you get your teeth done, you get your hair done, you get your glasses done, you do all that so that you don't have to go over. Anyway, so I did shopping. I got to the airport and we loved Tyler in Burnie. He was wonderful. But he was really embarrassed when he had to charge me. And like, fair enough, I did have a fair bit of freight, but still normally it'd probably be $100 excess freight normally. And you'd cop that. You wouldn't worry me. But it was $250 excess freight on top of that. So that now we're thinking of ways of trying, all of us, all the mums and all the people that live here.
How do you do it cheaper?
Which is the best way to get like those little extras. We normally would stop in at Woolies and go and do a shop before we'd come over and that was part of going away, but that's now taken away from us. Yeah. And I mean, God bless him, Tyler, he was great. But I said, this is the guy that works at Sharp in Burnie.
Yeah.
He's our handling agent.
Yeah, no, he's brilliant. And he's always good for the King Island customers, he's great. And I said, well, Tyler, can I just leave some of it off and can it come when it's not? Yeah. And he said, no, we don't do that anymore. Yeah. And I said, so what happens, can I go and drop it off at, what used to be Tasfast, yeah? And he said, well, they're dearer since I've had the mail contract, so they're dearer. So even that little
So there's not a lot of options.
There's no options. So that might be maybe 2 times a year you get off the island and you just buy the extra little things. Yeah. So you sort of, each way, you're getting hit basically. And then the only negative thing that I've got to say about if we were, I mean, I think that we should include air freight, definitely. But we've got to make certain that the people that are getting the money back, i.e. the shops, are passing it on to the consumer.
Yeah.
Otherwise there's no point.
Yeah. So it's about that transparency at the end of the day. Yeah.
So it's making them accountable and honest as well. I mean, they might get a rebate, but it's no good to the community if they're not afford
still
it
expensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm good. Thank you.
Good too, Richard.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Look, thank you so much. So, questions on notice, if we have given you any, are due by the 25th of October. And we really thank you so much for your evidence today and taking time out of your busy days. And I think that's the conclusion of the hearing. Thank you.